Hello, hello. Hope y'all are doing well. Let's switch it on. Hello, Powertail. Hello, Eden. Good to see you. Hello, Rustam. Hello, Dennis. We're all doing well. Hope everyone's ready for some feedback again. Just grab the coffee. Nice iced coffee. Get back into the swing of things. I mean, trying to get back into the swing of things. I've been preparing for the stream for an hour now, so yeah, I think I got through the majority of people, making notes and all that kind of stuff. We got some interesting stuff going on in the community this week, which is really cool. Always really excited to see what people have been up to. We've got some new people as well. Hello, this is early. No. It is not. It is not. It is, well, it might be if you haven't watched in a couple of weeks, because I did move last month, so we switched to a new time. Maybe that's why. Powertail is saying, I'm ready, napped for 40 minutes longer than expected. Oh my god. Usually it's 8. It is. It is 8. Just in my time zone now. We've moved to a different time zone. Hello, Leo. Hello. Welcome to the new people. Yeah, as I was saying, I'm seeing some people that are starting new projects, which is always like a really exciting part of the process. So I'm curious to have a look at what people are building. We're gonna do it together. So yeah, that's gonna be interesting. We also had 2 unfortunate stragglers for this day, so we'll see how far we get, but I don't think that Alice and John will be included for the stream, unfortunately. It's gonna be a packed stream, regardless. So we will see where we get. Let's see. Yeah, just making sure that like the event and all that kind of stuff is up and running. Yeah, it's not triggering though, which is interesting. Anyway. Hello, Mike. So what's been happening this week? A lot of stuff. So it's a little bit of a self-imposed grind at the moment when it comes to our academy stuff. So I've been doing a lot of video editing, a lot of website stuff, a lot of getting together with Sunny. Sunny's doing a lot of work as well. We're making really good progress. Honestly, I'm really happy with how the site functions now. Really happy with all the work that has been done. We have some really cool stuff coming up. And then Sunny is doing the lessons. I've also been fiddling around with like some other things as well. This is what I call a hobby now, but whenever I am not working on the academy stuff, what I'll do is I'll experiment with new things coming up potentially. So I'll give you an example. So one of the things that I'm currently working on is getting the salary database, the thing that I was showing off like in Notion like a couple of months back. I'm trying to port that to the website, and I'm trying to find ways to streamline that in its own way, so that you can basically go to like your Bionic Sin dashboard and you have like all the graphs and like all the different things there, which constitutes like a little bit of vibe coding from my end. But yeah, it's going okay, I guess. Question mark. We'll see. Like I figured out like how to streamline the data already. So that part is done. Now I just need to figure out like how am I gonna filter the data in such a way that makes it interactable to people. So that's currently what I'm trying out. And currently I got one graph on the website which kind of correlates like all the data per country, which is pretty cool. Yeah, obviously I want to do more with that stuff. So that's one thing that I've been playing around with. And then, yeah. Yeah, what else have we going? Work's been busy. Busy. And then just, yeah. It's honestly, we're pretty much like just focused on like all the core stuff coming out now. Like 100%. I think I've seen that you showed that Poland was passed in the statistics. Really interesting to see it. Are you going to be hosting the Fable Showcase? Well, no, I'm not going to be hosting the Fable Showcase. I have no involvement in that whatsoever. Oh, Senka, you showed that you had a Polish part in the statistics. Yeah. Actually, look, because that's the thing. Like, I was getting to the point where either I was gonna do a bunch of Notion stuff, which was getting really tedious and really cumbersome. I'll show you what I mean. So, if we switch on over to, is that the main screen? Let's have a look. Cool. So, if we go and have a look, you're getting a look into the back end now. Game industry salaries. So the main reason why this is just become so cumbersome, right? Like, even if I click on the United Kingdom, it takes a lot of time to just like get it all loaded in. I think this is now cached on my end, right? But yeah, it takes a lot of time just to load in. So that's why I want to be able to visualize it on the website and also have like the presentation and or like the form where you add your own things, where you add your own anonymous salary in as well. Because basically the annoying thing now is that whenever I create like a new page, so let's say this is like the United Kingdom page, and I then want to set up like a new one for, let's say, Poland, right? I basically duplicated that page, and then I need to go in here for every single one. And instead of United Kingdom, I need to set that to Poland. And then I need to do that for this one as well. And it just, see, and then it like lags out a little bit. So it becomes like really freaking annoying. So that's why I really wanted to look for like a better option so that we can just have like one large graph that everyone can interact with on the website rather than me setting it up here and becoming really cumbersome for everyone. Because yeah, this is all still just like UK data that is on the Polish dashboard. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen there. But then hopefully once we got that out, yeah, I kind of want to make that a part of like just visible for everyone, right? So you don't have to be a member. It will just like live on our website, and then hopefully a lot of people can engage with it and submit their own stuff to it as well, kind of as like a permanent thing. But we'll see. We will see. So I've been working a little bit on that, which is coming along, you know, slowly but surely. So that's been coming along quite well. Again, it's literally my hobby piece, right? So it is it is literally yeah, I literally spend like a couple of hours a week on it or something like that, like if it even is that, because most of the time is going to go to the actual website now. Oh, there's actually one thing that I want to show off. So if we switch on back to the website, so done a couple of updates to like the visuals here, but I think the more interesting thing is that we now have like a new page for the team challenges, which is really cool. It's just a showcase for like everyone's work, and even inside of these pages, like all of these pages have been updated to be more reflective of where we think like the challenges are going, right? Like making it more appropriate and more serious than it was before. And then also, I've added a mentorship tab in. So for people that are interested, this has been like a thing for a while, but you can actually book a mentorship directly from the website, because before we didn't really have something like that, you know? But I am available for like full mentorships, but also like single advice sessions as well. I just wanted to give that a shout out. So feel free to check that on out as well. But yeah. Your office is looking cool. Hey man, thank you so much. Yeah, it's nice. I spend a lot of time in here as well, so yeah, it's getting a nice place. We got a plant there as well, which is the first plant in the office, and probably gonna get like some new ones in the future as well. So yeah, thanks, Eden. Thank you. Yeah, I've been working hard on the website, especially on like the back end stuff, like basically your dashboard and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I am honestly really happy. I am honestly really happy with the way that it's looking, the way that we're treating it now, and it becomes more. If it's more becoming, yeah, rest time like it's becoming like an ecosystem, right? Like it's like it's no longer just like a Discord. Now it feels like everything is sort of like connecting, and we're building like a bunch of resources, and it's becoming like a hub, which is always what I imagined, really, right? Like when we call ourselves like the home of environment art, we really, I take that seriously, and I kind of want to build and build and build upon that, you know. So yeah, it's taking time, but we'll get there. We will get there. And then I think I don't know if I showed this because I fixed like the portfolio leaderboard as well. So now you can actually see previous recordings, and then also check out like who scored what and view their portfolio and all that kind of stuff. So that is set up as well. Really happy about. So yeah, just wanted to showcase all that stuff off. Yeah, hard work is paying off. I hope so. I hope so. I think the next big thing is definitely going to be the courses, right? Like we've been working really hard on that. We've had like a bunch of really talented people to help us build that as well. So that is going to be like the next big push, and we'll see how that goes. Because I'm equal parts excited and also equal parts terrified. But I guess that's normal. Really inspiring mindset. Yeah, like honestly, like this is something that I'll say to everyone, right? It's been a while since I said it actually, but like there's so many opportunities and tools and things that you can just do by yourself now that it is really it is really it's easier than ever to like build something for yourself, right? And I try to be like somewhat of an example of that. Stranger is saying your team challenges page is not displaying previous work. It just shows no items found and the team member's name. Interesting. Oh, that might be older challenges. That might be older challenges because I don't think we finalized the setup of like way older challenges just yet. Let me quickly check that. Yeah, you are right. Yep, that's something that I still need to set up. Thank you for catching that. Trying to see all the challenge entries. Yep, that's definitely something we need to try and fix. Or like I need to fix. And also it seems like the people's profile icons are missing as well. So thanks for bringing that up. Hello, Lily. Hope you're doing well. But yeah. But hey, look at me yapping. How is everyone else doing? Everyone else having a good time? Anyone else working on like some really interesting or exciting stuff this week? Feel free to let me know. And also for people that are new to the stream, this is an open forum, right? So if I'm going through someone else's work, but you want to ask questions and all that kind of stuff, doesn't matter what about, really. I mean, to a certain degree. Then yeah, feel free to throw them in a chat and we can discuss it. Eden is saying, excited for the global game jam next week. Oh shit! It's been ages since I've done a game jam myself. I am itching to start building the components for my own game. Right, so the medieval project, as I was getting back into it like last week, I kind of got this itch of like, okay, the medieval project is cool, and it's like my little playground, and I'll probably keep using it throughout, I don't know, through the years still. But I kind of want to start building like, I don't know, throw out some ideas and see what I can do visually, and see if I can kind of get to like, I don't know, an interesting art style that is probably out of my normal art style or something like that we can play around. So maybe that's a topic for future live streams, especially the Friday ones now. But yeah. But yeah, are you so Eden? When you're taking part in the global game jam next week, are you gonna go to like a physical location, or are you just gonna do it from home? And then McVal is trying, is losing his mind over trying to get the right scale of modular pieces. Ah, yes, the modular pieces back and forth. You got this, McVal. You got this. Yeah, I think the last game jam that I did was actually at school, and that's been a while. Oh my god. It's a bit of a mix. I mean, the last year of uni right now, so probably going to go and set up camp in one of the classrooms. Oh yeah, that's cool. I do love the vibes of a game jam. You know, everyone just smash into a single room, and then just getting together, being like really creative in like a really short amount of time. Always loved the feel of it. You know, I think for me, there's something about like chaos and stress where I really thrive in a weird way. Like, it feels like otherwise I get too comfortable. I don't know. Does someone else have that where like everyone is like rushing and like trying to get stuff done that you're like, I don't know. It feels like, to me at least, it's like a very infectious thing. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I do really enjoy game jams. They're so cool. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where my own project goes, really. Um I am curious. I I also have this other idea that I'm kind of playing around with, and I was doing some research into it because Jeremy from Dynasty is doing this really cool project where he's building a project with the community, right? And I think that's freaking awesome. So we'll see if that sticks around for the long end. Um but yeah, I kind of got like, I don't know, I guess like inspired by that idea too, and I was like, oh, it would be cool if we can make something together. But yeah, I don't want to do it like, this is the thing, like I don't want to, because I don't want to commit to like something really really big with like a bunch of people, and then I don't know, not properly plan it out, right? So I feel like that needs like a lot of planning, even way more than me just like playing around with my own visual stuff in like Unreal. Audit 13, is that what it's called, Power? I'm not sure actually if it has a name. You might be right though. I've only looked at like a couple of streams where he was like going over it. Hello, Henrik. Good to see ya. Yeah, he's doing some really cool stuff. But yeah. Artel saying, I think so. I check every once in a while and it seems like a cool concept, like the game itself. I actually don't know what the game is. I mean, I get that it's like it's like a puzzle game where you have to inspect like the individual components, right? But that's as far as I get with it. I actually need to dive into it a little bit deeper, I think. But yeah, we'll see. I think that was always an interesting thing. But then, to me, I guess I'm not a pure artist anymore, right? I think about the business side like really quickly. Like, what do you do with that, right? Like from a community perspective, because releasing it for free makes the most sense and is the easiest, right? But then, I mean, you're putting like your heart and soul into it, into something that is so big. And in Jeremy's case, he's doing like a lot of art directing and like a lot of feedbacking and all that kind of stuff, which is, he's a fucking star for doing so, right? And I think he's great at doing it too. But that is, the more that I started thinking about that, that's not necessarily what I want to do. That's why I love the concept of like our team challenges, because it's like really intense, and then it's just like, okay, we can split off and do our own thing again, and then like get together, it becomes really intense, and then we like break apart again, right? I think I prefer that more for the stuff that we're doing, right? Because yeah, like otherwise, like if you don't release it free, then you need to do some sort of like really weird like engineered system. I mean, to be honest, like not too dissimilar from what we tried to do with the studio stuff that completely failed at the end. Was that we assigned point values to the props that you were making, and then based on those point values, if the pack did well, which it didn't, then we would actually divide like the profits from that, right? Based on the points. So the whole pack had like this amount of points, and then we calculate that based on like your share of those points that you contributed to that pack. But that's an easy thing when it comes to like an asset pack, right? But how do you track someone's time if they're actually working on a game for like all these individual components? You know, it becomes really tricky. Hey Swan, good to see ya. How are you doing? Oh, I don't even know if this is interesting to bring up, but I was listening to a podcast with like barely any views that was talking about like the financial side of Ubisoft, and there was some like really interesting, at least to me, like notes that they brought up, right? A couple of things that stood out to me at the podcast was that they, and this is all just like from hearsay and me like not understanding like 100% of what they're saying, right? Because sometimes they went really deep into the business side. But it was really interesting that they brought up the idea that they seemed like the profitable ones, they were gonna ship them off to like Vantage Studios, which is like this new subsidiary that like Ubisoft is spinning off. And then it's basically they assumed that they were gonna settle the debt with like the main Ubisoft company, right? So they're spinning off this new thing, new financials, all that kind of stuff, throw like a bunch of IPs at it. I mean, throw their most profitable IPs at it. And then yeah, leave the rest at like normal Ubisoft, which is like, yeah, if you start thinking about it that way, I don't know, it becomes really weird. But yeah, I found that like that interview like really interesting in terms of like, just like trying to understand where like Ubisoft is going, right? And how you fit into that picture. There was another interesting thing which could actually be really interesting for you to use as a benchmark if you want to negotiate for a company, right? There was this measurement of what was it specifically called again? Because you can have it in a couple of ways. I think that measurement is called net bookings per employee. So what that's basically doing is it looks at like the whole business side of, let's say, a company, let's say in this case Ubisoft, right? It looks at like what they net book in a year, and then divide that by the amount of employees, and then you basically get like a very rudimentary like value of what your work contributes averaged within the whole company structure, what you basically contribute on average to Ubisoft, right? So or what they make from your labor, right? If you want to make it really simple. So I found out like a really interesting measurement, and then I started looking at can I ask what booking means in this context? Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually gonna make sure that I got that right, because my understanding of net bookings is basically when you look at like all the sales of all the games, you subtract like all the expenses and all that kind of stuff, and then basically the money that goes into like Ubisoft's account where they have like the profits from it, right? So yeah, net bookings refers to the total value of new sale contracts or commitments a company secures during a specific period, after subtracting cancellations, refunds, and lost business. Okay. This is a good one to look up because we want to make sure about this. It represents the net value of new business gain that a company can reasonably expect to convert in future revenue. Okay. So it's not necessarily revenue, but it's a sort of like rudimentary measure to give you like an idea of what your future revenue is going to be, right? So now we get back because the reason why I bring like all this freaking boring stuff up, right, is because one of the tips when it comes to negotiating in a very traditional way is you need to find out what your labor, what you do as your job contributes to the product that you're making, right? And with something like if you're in a sales position, that is really easy to track because you are making the sales, so you can just like look at the amount of sales you made and then look at like how much each individual sale makes and then just times that amount per sale, right? So you can do like, oh, I made like 10 sales this month, so 10 sales times 60,000, you get like a number, right? But that becomes really difficult to do when it comes to, let's say a games company, right? Because your labor is like so diffuse and there's so many, so many different aspects to it. Where I found that like going back to the net bookings per employee, I found that like a really interesting number to kind of give you some sort of an idea, right? Because otherwise we have no idea. To give you an example, so if we look at the net bookings per employee for Ubisoft, that comes down to approximately 122,000 per year, right? So that is per employee. That's what they reasonably expecting to make from what you bring to the table, right? Per person, which is really interesting, right? Because then if you think about like the wages, you can definitely see that it's at least to me, it's a little bit of empowerment to like go and ask for like a little bit of a raise, you know? For sure, there's a lot of complexities within it. There's like a local tax, there's like what your pay scale for the region is, there's like your health benefits, there's your pension and all that kind of stuff. You need to factor that in somewhere, right? But at least we have a number now. And that's where it gets like really interesting because then you can look at, I mean, a ridiculous example would be like Valve, right? So Ubisoft has 122,000 net bookings per employee. Valve has approximately 50 million in revenue per employee. So that's not net bookings, but that's like revenue, right? It's crazy because they make so much more money, but they have so much less people that work for them that on average, like everyone like contributes like way more in total in value to the company, right? It's really interesting. Yeah, because they only have like, I don't know, 80 employees according to like some of the latest stats. If you then compare that to like the 17,000 people working at Ubisoft, right? Yeah, you're doing some different comparisons. But yeah, I don't know if that's interesting. I found that like really interesting to kind of figure out like, okay, what do I actually contribute to like an employer monetarily wise, right? Because that always felt like a very vague thing that the only thing that I knew is that they were willing to pay me this, so it had to be more than what they were willing to pay me, right? That makes the most sense. But I never really had like sort of a rough idea of what that could be. Obviously, within games, what does happen a lot is that we talk about like established companies, right? That have like their own runway, which means that they have like a sort of amount of cash that they have like on their bank account that gives them like an amount of time that they can continue working on the next projects, right? Before they run out. With newer companies, that's different, right? Because their money just comes from like investors and all that kind of stuff. With it's a little bit of a different story. But yeah, I find that really interesting. Just like from that interview, you know, like that's why I like to listen to like these random podcasts where on the outset it doesn't really interest me, right? Like the business side of games, like really going into the business side, and these were like all business analysts, right? Where it's like, I don't know, it feels like really dry. But then you listen to it and you feel like these golden nuggets. Would be great to know what about Hazelight and Larian. Well, you can just look it up for yourself, right? So let's do Larian Games. Let me see if their like information is public. So yeah, so Larian Studios' estimated annual revenue is 140 million, and the company has 550 employees, right? So, giving this rough data, the estimated net bookings or the revenue per employee for Larian Studios is approximately twice that of Ubisoft, coming down to like $250,000. And Hazelight is probably going to be more difficult, right? Because I mean, they are a part of like EA, right? So I don't know if their financials are separate. Oh no. No, I was wrong. They're not. So Hazelight has net revenue per employee of 200,000. You name some of the podcasts. I'll need to look it up actually because I am so bad at saving these. Let me have a look. Let me see if I can find it for you. Can I look at my history? Oh my god, I watch so much game stuff. Let's see. There we go. It's a podcast with 200 views.
All right, hey everyone.
So, let me link this in the chat so that you can check it out for yourself. It's a podcast. It's a channel called The Game Makers, and the title is "Why Tencent Paid like 1.25 billion for 25% of Ubisoft best IPs." Yeah. McVal is asking, wonder what Mojang's was when it was still a small studio. I mean, dude. I mean, just look at Notch, right? Like, fucking rich guy right now. But I mean, there's other examples. I was looking at the numbers from Hello Games, for example, right? Another really small team that made a really successful game. Let me see. Yeah. Let's say. It's having issues with this one, for example. Interesting. I mean, it doesn't matter. Let's see. It's a wide range. It kind of depends, right? But yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that it kind of gives you like an idea, right? I mean, not sure. I mean, it's not like you can necessarily directly use it in like negotiations, right? Where you can see, where you can come at them and be like, "Hey guys, I know that you make like net bookings of like 250K, so you can give me like 50K as a junior." You know, there's still market realities and all that kind of stuff to take into account as well. But I feel like the more information you have like that, the more power it gives you, right? The more power it gives you to like negotiate in the future, or I don't know what you contribute to a company, right? I found that really interesting. That was the big takeaway from me. It was then also really interesting to hear business analysts talking about games overall, right? Because they just have like such a different non-emotional view compared to what we do, right? Because we are a part of the games industry. I mean, they never really said anything bad about like the people working in it, to be fair. Um, but it was really interesting to hear them talk about like, you know, why the restructuring happened, what they're trying to do with that, and you know, like how that makes them look. I mean, they were talking about how the restructuring makes them look like more lean if they didn't wanna sell out to like what happened to Vantage Studios, right? It makes them more attractive as like a company. And also there was there was also, and this was very interesting. I don't, and this was anecdotal, right? One of the, I think the host of that podcast said that there is apparently a notion that certain companies won't hire you if you come from Ubisoft, because they, and again, this is like anecdotal, like evidence, right? Like there's no proof of this, like no one really said that on the record. But that was like really interesting that they brought that up, because I always had this, and this might also be like regional bound, but I always had this perception that that was like a door opener rather than a door closer. So I don't know if that's like grounded in reality at all, but that was like an interesting comment that they made. Yeah. Hello, Sheila. Sorry, we're talking about like boring business stuff. I mean, I found it really interesting. I learned like a bunch from that podcast as well. It was unexpectedly interesting to have them talk about it, and then maybe that's because like I've been a part of Ubisoft, right? So maybe that's why, that's where my interest comes in. But yeah. Oh, what makes it a door closer? Well, Satish, that is a good question. I think the arguments that they brought up is that God, I'm not going to paraphrase, right? But they basically were talking about this idea that people working at Ubisoft were, because they were used to this bad corporate structure, it made them lazier and less productive than people working at other companies, right? And they're very used to a production-heavy environment, because I mean, they work with 20,000 people, right? So of course, like everything needs to go and happen in certain ways, right? So they brought up an example from, let's say I want you to do a change, right? So I am an environment artist, and for example, there's a level designer on the other side. They brought up an example that I can't really talk to you. I need to go to like my lead, who then goes to the director, and then the director goes and talk to that director, and then it goes down again, right? So it's like instead of like direct communication, it goes into like a bridge. That is one thing that I disagree with. I do know that it's heavily dependent on the studio, which is why it makes me lean into just I think that it's regional bound, right? Because in my experiences, sure, there was production overhead, for sure. I mean, that's just a given, right? Because you work with like 20,000 people or like multiple thousands of people on like one product. So there has to be some sort of mechanism, right? Keeping it all in place. For the most part, yeah, it wasn't really that bad. Not as they mentioned it, at least. Not to the degree where like other companies wouldn't necessarily hire them. At least from what I can tell. But yeah, that's interesting, right? Like you hear such an anecdote and it's like, huh, makes you think. Like, and then they brought up like some of the examples, and it was just like interesting to hear them talk about that. But yeah, I completely lost my train of thought. I was gonna pivot to something else, but I can't remember what anymore. Oh yes, I'm gonna give another shout out actually. I was watching a really good, like a really interesting breakdown of game graphics, especially from Kingdom Come 2. So let me dig through my history again, and let me share that with you as well. It was, it's again very nerdy, but it's from Game World Art, and they were talking. They basically had reshade enabled, and they were talking about the geometry of Kingdom Come 2, which was pretty interesting. I'll show you a little bit of it, and then I'm gonna share their work as well. Let me first of all share it in the chat so that we can see that. Saw that yesterday, some nice insights. Yeah, I feel like it would have been more interesting to see like a wider variation of things, right? But it was also pretty interesting to just see like the breakdown of like a road system, basically. That's what the majority came down to, from as far as I could see. Yeah,
well,
basically.
And then you can see the rocks.
Basically just going into like really close to like the floor, and even here he's looking at like how parallax occlusion mapping works, right? Where it's really interesting to kind of see like, oh, this is an actual rock, but then where it blends with the terrain, like it's almost invisible. Because if you start from like, let's say, what was the angle that he started at? So you can kind of see that like these rocks at the bottom here, I assumed that this was mostly geometry, right? Especially the pebbles and all that kind of stuff, because I never looked at it up close. But then once you actually go into the viewer, like a lot of that is just parallax occlusion mapping, which is really cool. And then you can kind of see that some of it is geometry, like on the sides as well. And he does like a really good job of like digging into this stuff, which was really interesting to see. I saw it, really nerdy, but I liked it. Yeah, this stuff is really nerdy, right? Like just looking at a floor texture to figure out like which pebble is like parallax occlusion mapping or like geometry, right? But it is really cool. Like I encourage you like check it out for yourself. Then he did talk about like rocks and all that kind of stuff too, and did some more breakdowns. But it was, yeah, it was interesting to see. He's so happy in that freeze frame. Yeah, he is. And he's a genuinely lovely guy as well. So that's additional points in the bucket. He'll probably make more areas, more videos for other areas. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And then there was another one called Next Level Game Art or something like that. Let me look it up as well. Which is a channel that, I mean, this is not really that relevant for me necessarily, but I think it's good to share with all of you. And let me switch back over. So, for example, Next Level Game Art is kind of going into, in this case, Arc Raiders, and then just having a look at like how the modular kits are built, how the channel partner works, and just like, yeah, going from like early exploration and really diving into like the nitty gritty of stuff and like trying to break it down into like individual components, which is like pretty cool as well. So I'll share that one here too. Swan is saying, yo, love this channel. Yeah. Some things he's talking about are really helpful. Oh yeah, the previous guy is from Rockstar. Yeah. I don't know this guy. This guy has experience in games, but it's more varied, I think, because I was looking into, I was actually looking into like his experience a little bit, and it seems more varied between like Arc Viz and games and movies and all that kind of stuff. Hey, don't shoot. Honestly, I've been on a binge of like Arc Raider content. I've never played the game myself, but I'm getting close to like where I actually want to get the game. So I might take some time off in between tasks to play a little bit of Arc Raiders, because I do want to check it out as well. But yeah, let me share this one as well. This channel is also my meditation stuff. We honestly, so I I want to do more of this stuff. Like I want to explore more YouTube channels because honestly, for the majority of time, I am pretty much out of touch with like what other YouTube creators are doing, or especially in the realms of game art, right? So yeah, if anyone has like any good recommendations, always feel free to DM them to me on Discord. That would be cool. We're going to finally see the Tim and Adam collab on Arc Raiders. Well, we might do. Yeah, I'll be up for that. If you're going into Arc, you should definitely check out Hunt Showdown. Yeah, I think I am more of a fan of Arc, because it is way more PvE based. So, for context, some of my friends who I was with at Ubisoft, they are fiends when it comes to Hunt Showdown. We used to talk about it a lot, like it was really interesting. And that is something that never really interested me. Like Hunt feels a bit more diehard than Arc Raiders does. Because in general, I also need to give the context that I'm not a fan of like extraction shooters, right? So that's why I didn't jump into Arc Raiders to begin with, because I was like, oh, an extraction shooter, great. But I am really interested in diving into it also from like a technical perspective as well. Because, I mean, it is also Unreal, right? And it runs really smooth. I was looking at some like Digital Foundry reviews on how they achieved all that stuff as well. And it was pretty interesting from like a technical perspective as well. So yeah, I kind of want to dive into that and dig into it a little bit more. I honestly don't even play the game for loot anymore. I just go in and have fun. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Yeah. Friday stream playing Arc Raiders. That would not be a bad idea. That'll be fun. Maybe we'll do like a game stream. Who knows? Oh, let me see. I think like not everything is showing up, because only a couple of people can share links in the chat on YouTube for some reason. So yeah, you will, if you have any links for like YouTube links, like feel free to send them over to me in DM on Discord, please. That would be awesome. EMC 3D is cool. Yeah. Yeah, I've been watching some of his stuff, like some of the social media posts that they're doing whenever they host like workshops and stuff too. We were actually, I need to pick this back up, but we were actually God, this is ages ago. I think we were like pretty close to getting him involved with the team challenges at a certain point. And this is like ages ago, so we need to pick that back up as well. Hello, Arvid. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, thank you. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So yeah, maybe Friday Arc Raider stream. Maybe. I might need to delay that a little bit because, I mean, it is paid. And yeah, I need some money. Pretty scrappy right now. He should give a lighting art talk for Beyond Extent. Yeah, we could definitely talk about that. Someone book a mentor. No, please don't do that. that feels weird. Mike, let's see. So hey, now we're talking about geometry and current implementations. Do you know a good reference for current low poly budgets in the industry, or for things like props and weapons? Nope. Because it is so varied that there's no like industry standard to things, right? Honestly, probably, Mike, your best bet is just going on like ArtStation until you find someone who posted like wireframes. And honestly, just going from there. I think that could be your best bet, to be fair. That's going to be more relevant than anything else. Because, yeah, Depends on techniques used. It depends on like target console, like target hardware and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's annoying, but I can't really give you like any specifics on that question. Because I mean, also, yeah, I was gonna give you like a number for, let's say, weapons, but honestly, like, first of all, I've never really made a weapon for a game, right? And the numbers that I might have might actually be outdated already. So, yeah, unfortunately, can't really help with that one specifically. My gut feeling would be 30 to 50k or something like that. But again, it depends on the complexity of the weapon, right? It depends on yeah, it depends on so many factors. Tried it for the first time, the RGB mask workflow, really useful. Hey, that's awesome, Arvid. Glad you seem picking that up. I can show you how to lose all your good loot by dying. Let's go. A reverse mentorship where the mentee teaches you ARC. An exchange program. Hello, Maddie. Good to see you. Small steps, but I love it. Small steps is where everything begins, you know? Like, I mean, everything that you see here, everything that Beyond Extend is also small steps, right? So it's honestly the best approach to life is small but deliberate steps over a long period of time. That is going to build you whatever you want. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the Friday stream. I also did do a little bit of cleanup and some testing for some of the meshes, but we're probably going to talk about that on Friday because I'm not feeling too confident about it just yet. Next, a full open world game. yeah. You go from like modeling a basic asset without textures, then maybe doing some RGB masking, and then like a full open world MMORPG, right? That's like the game dev like loop that you go into. Don't let anyone else stop you, you know? And also, you can't hire anyone else, you know? You're building a full open world MMORPG by yourself, as a caveat. Easy. All right, y'all. It's time. Let's switch on over. Let's do some feedback. So you know what time it is. If you wanna raise your hands, we'll go with you first. We'll go by sequence in the chat. And also for other people that are just jumping in, if you are not participating or getting feedback, feel free to ask any questions, throw in your comments, you know, the more the merrier. Oh, McFarlane is making it even harder in your own engine. Yeah, at least, you know. No! Leia is second! No! Hello, Emissart. Welcome. Hope you're doing well. Good to see you back. Let's have a look. So, I'll allow you first if you need. No, it's too late. It's too late. The decision has been made. Okay, power. Let's have a look. Let me throw up the Discord. Let's get some context here for you. Right. So, this project I want to focus on good reference gathering, upping the quality of the work. I want to improve my workflows like modularity, trim sheets, tidables, and all that kind of stuff. I chose to work from a main concept. Yes, good stuff. You don't want to be designing stuff yourself. You just want to be able to replicate. That's going to cut out a lot of the work already. Love that. That way that I can really work on my workflow here. Yeah, 100%. You are cutting out like at least half of the work you're doing, honestly, by just picking a concept. which is great. So let me make sure that everything is on the table. So my main question here is, how would people approach the door? Would you make it a texture, a mesh, or a sculpt? And to be specific, we're talking about like these two doors. You got 3 unique doors in your scene. Right, so you got 1, 2, and then potentially 3, right? For these doors, because we are going for an environment that is going to showcase a lot of different workflows, right? I would honestly just do them unique, because that allows you to basically do the rest of the scene in more modular ways, right? So I would say go for unique for the details and to keep things simple, because sometimes simple is just way better, right? Because it allows you to just be like, hey, I'm just going to do a sculpt, bake it down, texture it, done, right? Instead of having to faff about with RGB mass and all that kind of stuff for 3 doors, usually not worth it. And then also, this is a little bit of context because you were talking to Adam in our community, and you said that you wanted to do a sculpt pass first and then use tidables on top of it. Usually, I wouldn't combine those 2 workflows. If you are gonna go through the hassle of actually sculpting a lot of unique detail, you might as well just bake that down onto like a really nice low poly and then just texture it uniquely, right? Because otherwise, again, you're gonna have to get like pretty complex. And I would say that those like workflows are more reserved for like things that require it rather than a door that can be just like made pretty straightforward. So I was gonna say just go for unique. Because that's what we're showing up here, right? So unique is quick and it's straightforward, right? So if it's small enough, you can just like do a sculpt, bake it down, texture it. That is way easier than already having to pre-plan the trims and maybe the RGB masks and set up a shader and all that kind of stuff, right? So the simpler we can keep our entire environment, the better, right? If you then compare it to trims or like tidables in this case, right? Like they are usually good for larger scale projects where you can reuse a bunch of things, right? I love working with them because the stuff that I've always made was like always from bigger scale, right? And I'm also a bit of like a, I don't know, like a technical freak when it comes to that, because I love playing around with those workflows too, and I like to reduce the amount of steps that I need, right? And also, I kind of hate doing unique stuff, if I'm honest. It's not my thing necessarily, even though I will do it when it's needed, right? Cool. And then the second question is, how was the approach so far? Do you have any other ideas in mind? And then I did like a little bit of an overpaint here. So we are changing the doors to be unique, right? So that's what we're doing here. And then to be sure, I just wanted to double check with you, because you got your kit for the windows, I'm assuming, right? Because for these walls, what you can do, that is literally just 1 or 2 tidables, and then just you could almost make this scene. I mean, you could make it modular if you wanted to, right? But if you really want to preserve that like really nice layout where it's like really, I don't know, really nicely flowing and it doesn't feel like it's just a straight street, you could honestly just make a mesh that is almost unique to the building itself, right? And then you can just focus on, again, making a unique mesh for that whole building, or maybe the section of the street. And then you just vertex paint that whole wall as like a unique thing with cutouts that you can then fit in your windows, right? Because honestly, if we are executing this scene just by itself, I wouldn't necessarily go for like a traditional modular approach. Apart from maybe trying to modularize like the add-ons that go onto the buildings, right? So like the staircases, like the jetties, like those things that you attach onto the building, I would try to make them modular and then keep the street layout more organic, or like more as like a single mesh. And when I want to be very specific, right? When I say single mesh, what I'm thinking is that this guy could just be like a very simple mesh. And then when it comes to some of the other pieces in your scene, yeah, I mean, if you want to make this like really nice and really curvy and really flowy, so that would be like mesh number 1, right? For example. And then what I would do... Where do we split things up? That's what I'm asking, right? And so... maybe we'll do something like this. That's our second mesh. And then maybe this sort of stuff, like this wall, basically. That wall section. That is going to be like our third mesh. And then you can just like quickly git bash like a couple of individual buildings to just fill the background in. And they could potentially be like, I don't know, just blocks of buildings, right? Because we're barely going to see them anyway. The scene about to go crazy? Hell yeah! I'm sorry saying I was about to go to sleep, but remembered it's Wednesday and thought I need to drop in since it's been a bit. Yeah, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're skipping sleep just to be here. You wouldn't do that modular, I mean a mesh? Well, so it's modularity is good when you need to build a whole city, right? So that's where modularity really comes into play, because then I can just like build with like more and more pieces as I go along. However, if you wanna get the most interesting composition with the most flexibility, I would personally do it like this, because then I can just focus on creating like this one building, like this one facade, making it look really nice, because then I don't need to be worried about like, okay, let's say a simple example here, right? So let's say we decide and we find a way to, let's say, make these modular, right? But this door looks slightly different, so I want to add some extra geo to this door. That now means that this door is going to have extra geo that doesn't really warrant it, right? And the more uniqueness that I add to this door frame, the more it's going to look like it's going to be repeating, right? So I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to be doing in that case, if it was a modular kit, instead of repeating one of those elements, I am going to make a variation, right? So instead of these being like the same one, I add like a second variation. And then we're in the territory of like, okay, what's the point? Because everything that I can see is not modular anyway, right? So why don't I, at that point, just make it unique and kind of like add as much geo, as much uniqueness as I need to, right? So it's more that sort of thinking where if you wanna make things unique, you have to make them unique. It sounds so stupid to say out loud, but yeah, if you want to make them unique looking, probably having them as a singular mesh makes more sense, right? If your concept is more rigid, right? If it is more static in nature and the reusability is like a feature of the concept, then you can lead into that by using modularity, right? For example, if you're making like a stereotypical like Brooklyn street or New York street or something like that, right, in a major city, then obviously stuff is going to be modular because that allows you to like quickly build up like a new street if you wanted to, right? There is one caveat that I'll give. If you really want to show off your modularity skills, right? If that is a thing that you want to showcase and you want to do a breakdown and you want to show that you can do it, then you can do the scene modular in a modular way. But yeah, then I also want to see you think around those edge cases that make it look more modular, right? Artel saying, okay, I get you. If I went for that approach, it helps keep things more organic and specific, and I can still explore modularity to some other stuff in the scene. Yeah, I think so. That's why I said the gantries or like the overhangs and all that kind of stuff, make those modular, right? Because that by itself, making like a standalone kit that has a lot of reuse and repurpose by the nature of it, right? And then if you then start using like a trim sheet like you are thinking about doing here, right? Like these wooden beam trim sheet. What I would do is potentially explore a way that you can basically all the wood here. All the wood is a single texture. Right? That is what I would do. So that you have your beams, your planks, your ornamental like railings, like all that kind of stuff. Just try to match it on one texture. And that can be like a combination of like a trim sheet with unique elements baked on top of it, or just a basic trim sheet, right? Whatever you want to do with that. But that's the way that I would approach it. And then you can showcase that you know where to apply unique elements where needed, but also take things modular to give yourself some flexibility as well, right? That's the way that I would approach it. So yeah. But yeah, you got the right components in there. I like the way that you're going about it. There's one... Yeah, this is the most interesting. So we talked about this little section, for example, right? If we isolate this little section, the way that I would do this is that this mesh would be unique, but it would be textured with hidables and potentially a trim for the top part, question mark. That's the way that I would go about it. So the mesh is going to be unique, but then the stuff that we add on top of it is going to be reusing from other parts of the scene, right? And then these guys, having them as a kit is good because we want to be able to add a bit more geometry and make them look like really nice, because that's where we focus our attention, right? And it's a nice foreground element. So we definitely want to have some geometry here. Right, cool. Rustam is saying, or in the case of modular approach, we can make some extra space at the bottom of those wall pieces, and the texture will be world aligned and with some decal dirt between the staircase and the wall. Yeah, that is more for like blending with the floor, right? You gotta be careful with like world aligned textures because they get really expensive really quickly, right? Well, I guess you're only like getting like one texture sample, so it's not as bad as like triplanar projection, for example. Yeah, disregard that. But yeah, definitely. Like if you want to then add like a bit more uniqueness, you will need to think around like, okay, how can I basically add more uniqueness to it, right? If you do things modular, we need to compensate with unique stuff. And with unique stuff, we have to oftentimes compensate and do modular stuff because that is just like untenable to do it for big scenes, right? Cool. Thanks, Powertail. I forgot to mention, I plan to do a tileable for that. Maybe a little bit of a concrete trim, since there's a lot of it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's more something that you can kind of figure out as you go along, in my opinion. It might also be cool that you have this as like more rough stone instead of it being so sleek and so, I don't know, so weird, right? Because there is a part of me that is like, there's so much cool, unique stuff in the scene, and then you look at like this edge, and it's just like, oh, that feels like really 3D to me. I wanna get rid of that and make it like really interesting, and almost make it as if like the stones have been like carved out. You know, that is, imagine that this is a brick wall, but that you can see like the individual cobblestones just like sticking out of it. You know, you can do some really cool stuff because again, this is a really important silhouette because it's in the middle of your scene. You want to do something way more interesting with the silhouette of that little wall. Cool. Hey, Joe. Good to see you. Feels like something is missing. They forgot to add the tile on top. Yeah, Quentin, I 100% agree. It's one of those things where, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you don't notice it. But if you then have to replicate the individual elements, you really see the defects of the concept art, right? Which again, the goal of a concept art is getting the mood and the atmosphere and the ideas across, right? It's not to have it like perfectly laid out so that you don't have to do any thinking. Cool. Thanks, Powertail. Good choice of concept. I like it. And best of luck. Next up, we have Leia, for which I haven't done any overpaints yet. So let's see. What can I help you with today, Leia? Let's have a read. Here's another thing. Sounds good. We'll explore these options. Thank you very much, Tim. Excited to work on this and update as I go. Let's go. Could there be a case in real-time pipelines when we can make similar scale pieces as unique as possible? For the purpose of narrative, for example. I mean, so there are a lot of games that actually make sections like that unique already, right? Because for the exact things that we brought up today, right? Modularity, you have to do a lot of work to make really good looking modularity that doesn't feel like it's stale, right? But as soon as you start, the issue with that is when you then add like a lot of unique stuff to your modular kit, that means that your kit is going to lose usability, right? Because now instead of like, I don't know, let's say 10 pieces, there's like 50 pieces because there's like variations and like details and all that kind of stuff. And at a certain point, there's a balance to me where like a modular kit is really effective, and then you're allowed to add additional details that don't have to do with the modular kit, right? So for example, you have like your wooden scaffolding, and then you build up your wooden scaffolding, and then what you do on top of it is you have like ropes and you have baskets and you have like, I don't know, little banisters and all that kind of stuff, right? We basically add that there to hide the feeling that it's modular. I would say for games, I wouldn't say wholly unique, especially when it comes to texture memory. Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely textures are something to keep in mind, right? You can't, if you're talking about like taking a section of a city, right? Or like the concept that we talked about just now and baking it down as a unique mesh, no. We still have to be smart about using tilables or blending in certain ways or something, right? Because then, yeah, if you're doing it fully unique, that's just gonna spiral everything out of control. Plus, also, to be honest, if we really think about like where a person, let's actually see if we can find like a good ref for this, right? Um, I am gonna have a look as to see if I can find something. Because I wanna kind of make an interesting example, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a good. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a good example actually. Do, 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 do. Okay, let's have a look. So let me switch over just for a second. Sure that everything is on the screen. So let's have a look at our graders, right? If we look at this screenshot, for example, the building itself is super simple, right? Really basic. And that is not as like an insult to like the developers or something like that, right? But like there's a normal thing that happens in game art is that we grab a bunch of, like, let's say in this case, like the big geometry is always going to be relatively basic, but then we add so much details on top of it that it feels really unique and it feels really like it can stand by itself, right? My point with this is that, coming back to what you were saying about like trying to cram as much detail in, like, let's say a section of a town, for example, then we don't need to do that because the detail in a town comes from the amount of set dressing and decals and all that kind of stuff that we add on top of it. So even if, like, let's say the street by itself is super basic, the detail comes from the stuff that we add on top of it, not from only the street itself. Oh, switch to whip. Hello, Eden. Is the order of whose work gets reviewed going by the order of who put their hands up in chat first? Yes, but it is the on-screen chat, because otherwise we've had some desyncs between people. Of course, you can't see it anymore, but let me quickly check. So let's see. We got Powertail, Leia, Dennis, Alice, then Top G, and then yourself, Eden, in that case. But yeah, we're going to be going a little bit quicker as well. Otherwise, we're going to be spending a whole bunch of time together, which I do love you all. But, you know, I also want to go to sleep at some point. So let's see. Leia, let's have a look at your work. My question is, the scene looks quite bland when it comes to colors, and I'm thinking of adding colors in the form of banners. Do you have any other ideas that I could add, that I could add some colors in the mix? I was looking at the Witcher 4 tech demo and how they utilize color to accentuate their environments. Well, here's the weird thing with the Witcher 4 tech demo, right? Is that I felt that their use of colors was really, it was over the top. It felt more like it felt like a Horizon Zero Dawn game or something like that, right? Like really colorful, like really out there, rather than what I assume The Witcher is. So we can use color in a very specific way, right? What I would do in your case, I would definitely try adding colors to the banners first, seeing how that looks, and then reevaluating where you need to go, right? Because if you add stuff in here already, I think that could be cool. What you can also try already, and this is really simple. Let's see. So we want to try the banners first. So number one was color. And we're just going to try and do something here, right? So if we go into hue saturation, right? And we're going to infuse like a little bit more color into the mix. Anything else that we can do? Brightness and contrast. I'm also going to put on some other music as well. Let's have a look here. Let's go for this one. I mean, this is not going to be like a good representation, right? Because if you want to balance your whole scene a little bit better, you can do something like this, right? And that is just me pushing the saturation of the colors a little bit more. Ideally, from what I can see here, is I want to darken the wood a little bit, because now it feels like the wood is almost fading in color, right? It feels like almost bleached wood or something like that, especially on the banisters. But that would be a thing to try out already, and make sure that your colors in your scene, like maybe get a little bit of a boost, right? So lighting and post-processing pass, yeah, I don't think so. I think it could also just be that you stayed away from using saturation in your textures in the scene in general, right? Because it's been a while since I had to do post-processing for myself, but if you think about it, right, it is easier if you, let's say, give yourself a little bit more saturation to play around with in the beginning, and then balance it out, or I don't know, add more in post-processing, right? Because right now you're starting from a base that has less color information. So let's say if you want to add more stuff in, you can only push it so far before it starts to look like really weird, right? So that's why maybe infusing your textures with a little bit more color and then rebalancing it in post-processing gives you a little bit more flexibility there. So, but it's also like, I mean, you brought it up yourself, right? That you feel that the scene feels quite bland. That just means that you have to, I mean, do the same thing that I do, right? Like go into Photoshop, do tweaking to the color and the lighting, and then see what you like, right? Because the way that you handle color and the way that you handle saturation and all that kind of stuff can indicate something about the scene, right? Or like your vision for the scene. Want to get like so bold. So yeah, testing in Photoshop can be a good way to try things out. And then once you get into the engine, you can make not your textures, you need to make your textures more vibrant. And then we can balance everything out again, right? Cool. Because if you have a look at like Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example, they have like really vibrant colors, but it still feels like it's a grounded game, right? So I would definitely have a look at some game examples too to see how they do it. Same thing for Arc Raiders, right? Like not a medieval game, of course, but like they chose to be more deliberate because they're more saturated with their colors because they wanted to give this sense of hope. Even though it's a post-apocalyptic game, right? In essence, they still wanted to give like their game a little bit of touch of a hope. Your second question is, I'm creating a list of decals which I want to implement into my scene. I would love to hear what you, what kind of decals you would see fitting in a scene like this. Yeah, a lot of dirt decals, right? For sure. You could do some damage decals for like on some of the walls, where, for example, you have like a very specific like cutout in some of the walls. That could be interesting. A lot of dirt. Potentially some moss or some like growth on. Wait, I'm just gonna make a generic list, right? So if we decals, cool. Dirt. Floor and walls. moss for rooftops, or just like some generic growth or something like that, right? Some more variation in there. Damage decals potentially for on some of the walls. And then you could, what I would do, I would start with these three. Add them in the scene, and then see if you need more. What I would always do in this case, especially when it comes to final polish, is I would look at the entirety of the scene. And let's imagine there's like a lot of really cool dirt decals and all that kind of stuff. But I'm like, everything feels like sort of similar in roughness values. Cool, okay, what can we do? Like maybe someone spilled some water, right? So, okay, maybe a water decal here, you know, to make this screenshot more like stand out a little bit more. And then maybe like a little bit of, maybe make an additional texture for mud. And it gives you like a little bit of flexibility in terms of like managing your roughness, right? So that you can add more contrast into the scene and make things more interesting. But that's something you'll have to build that up and then see where if you recognize that like, there's still something missing. There's still like a pop or like a little bit of contrast missing. Then finding a creative way on how you can balance that and add that into the scene. That's basically, if you do that a lot of times, that's what makes it a really good scene, right? Especially when it comes to like a detail phase of it. Maybe some vivid stucco, like in The Witcher 3, plus assets like some food and hay and some plants as well. Yeah, I think there was like also a timeline in mind, right? So I don't know. Those are some really good suggestions for layout to take into account. Let's see. For damage decals, a crack in grayscale would work nicely without pulling away too much. Or what would you recommend? It could literally just be like thinking about the layers, right? So you have some layering going on here, but let's say it reveals. I mean, you can do this in a texture as well, but now the cobblestone feels very similar, right? But what if, and you'll see this in like really old buildings, right? Like there's like aging that happens in the building methods already, where like you have a section that is like similar cobblestone, but then you have a section that is like way bigger and like more chaotic cobblestone, you know? And that can be a decal, that can be a texture as well. Yeah. Or maybe even if you think about like damage, you know, like trying to apply something at the bottom of the wall where it's just going to be like damage tones, right? Potentially better as a texture instead of a decal. But yeah, still something to look into. Not so much time left. Yeah, I know. You have to take into account what you can add and what you can't. Gotcha, thank you. Yeah, I would say best of luck. Have fun, and good luck with the next updates. Some shader setups have like a color multiplier. Would that be a bad habit? Then re-exporting them? No, that's not a bad habit. It's but what you want to do. I mean, it can be a bad habit. I'll explain why. So, it is a bad habit in a team setting because what you're then doing if someone else wants to touch the source files, right? Like the actual textures in, let's say, Substance Painter, then they don't have like the same changes. So what they might do is they might make the colors more saturated, but then if you already added saturation in the engine, then they might overcompensate, right? So it is an annoying practice when it comes to when it comes to the source meshes, right? However, if you then want to add like, hey, I got this like bare wood that looks good by itself, it's being used in the game, but I also want to have like an old bare wood, so I'm gonna desaturate the colors a little bit. That makes sense, because then we don't have to make like a new texture set to basically achieve something that we can add with a color multiply. So yeah, only keeping in mind like the source files for it. Did you see the stables on the right? You could add some decals with the hay on the ground. Yeah, I mean, that's a great option for sure. Super versatile as well. Cool. Next person in the list was Dennis. Oh yeah, this is gonna be a short one, Dennis, because honestly, from reading your comments, right? So your main goal is to lock down a solid, coherent, and relatively simple composition and lighting setup, so I can move on to finalizing the assets and actually finish the scene. In hindsight, I wish I started from a strong concept art. Designing an entire environment without a clear solid reference has been challenging for me. Yes, a challenge for everyone. So yeah, I am honestly not going to give you feedback. I think this is looking great. I want to see how you do with finalizing your assets, right? If that is a thing that you want to do anyway. What I will say is I will give you like a couple of reminders, right? Especially when we get into the polish phase. First reminder is that nothing is straight. So anything that's straight into the scene, try to make it not so. The other reminder would be do more with less. What I mean by that is you have a lot of assets in your scene already, which is awesome, right? How can we reuse those assets in a way that they look like a new asset while not having to make a new asset, right? For example, you have some clothes hanging. What if you just simply like wrap them up and fold them and make like a clothes pile? What if you have like your netting that you have, your fish netting on the left? What if you just simulate that in a different way and then you have like a pile of netting that you can add somewhere else, right? It is that kind of stuff. It is just reusing the items that you already have and just giving them a bit more life, right? Like really thinking about like how you can do that with all the assets in your scene. And then, yeah, maybe the last one that I'll add is fine-tooth comb. That is literally just like, okay, really zooming into different areas. And just really being like annoying with yourself, right? So like the rope here is supported by that stuff. That's cool. This is not being supported by anything. This is not really being supported by anything. Not that I can see. And it's literally just doing that for the whole scene, right? Like, oh, the stuff in the foreground here feels like it kind of needs something, right? Like a little nail or something like that here, because this doesn't really make sense. And that doesn't mean that you need to like make a new thing, right? You just scavenge around in the scene and just add that to the asset, right? But especially most importantly, foreground elements, they're going to be really important because that's where people are going to be paying close attention to, right? So if you want to polish anything up, start with the foreground and then work your way towards like maybe the midground, you know, maybe this little area, because that's where you're pulling the focus in, and the rest of it can honestly be just good like this. So that's where I would focus. Yeah, really going through like the fine-tooth comb thing, but do that in like a managed perspective, right? So start with the foreground, focus on what matters, and if something looks awkward, you know, like, I don't know if we can pick something out here. Okay, let's say this guy, right? So the rope seems to not be attached to like this thing. Does that matter from this distance? No, it doesn't. So that doesn't matter, right? It's more like the foreground elements that are more important than the background elements. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, fine-tooth comb for the foreground. Foreground and your focus areas, right? So where you focus on things. Cool. But yeah, otherwise, great stuff, Dennis. Keep up the good work. Finish this sucker up. Because I can tell you're at the finish line. And I think it's dangerous to just keep spinning wheels, right? Like at a certain point, we just have to be like, hey, look, this is good. Perfectionism is not a great thing. So just try to set like a time limit, for example. Let's say another week, try to finish up as much as you can and just post it, right? I mean, okay, take a week to finish like all the final bits of polish, and then take another week to do all the presentation and the nice breakdowns and all that kind of stuff, right? Take some time for that as well. So yeah, good stuff, Dennis. Cool to see this piece. Loved following the progress of it. And I think you've done a fantastic job on it. So you can be proud of it. Hello, Guillaume. It's been a while since I've seen you. How are you doing? Got it. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Dennis, you got this. Right. We've got close to 40 people here. Love it to see you all. I just want to throw another reminder. If you're new to these streams, feel free to ask me any questions that you have about game dev. I don't know. Anything that you might be struggling with when becoming an artist, let me know. Let me see if we can help. Guillaume is doing good. Good at 2026. Yeah. Happy 2026 to you too. Oh my god, we're almost a month in already. Jesus Christ, time flies. Anyway, let's just ignore that, you know? Let's just put that to the wayside. Ellis, unfortunately, you didn't submit in time, so we're going to have to skip you for this week. So we're moving on to Topji. Topji and then Eden. Let's switch on over. I like your updates. Topji is looking really, really nice. Let's have a look at your questions. Yeah, you got some reference there already. Cool. We're going to be talking about that in just a second. So, first question. I approached sculpting wood beams in two ways. The first image is with alpha, and the other is without alpha. I'm wondering which is more suitable for a wood beam, given it's going to be textured, and I don't want it to feel too busy. I was pretty much thinking a different technique. Also, the difference between like an alpha and a non-alpha really comes from like workflow-wise to me, right? What I mean by that is, if you use an alpha, you are basically baking your minor detail into your texture. So that also means that if you want to change like how noisy it feels, you will have to then go back to your sculpt and then have to like soften some shapes out or something like that, right? That's why I prefer to do without smaller details, because you can add those in texturing, right? So that's what I would do. I don't think you went overboard with it though. Maybe some of like the real small details can go, but like the majority still feels like it's like readable. But yeah, in general, it's good to go without an alpha, because then you can add those details in substance. Yeah. Good. And then for your second question, the foreground, the wall is, I'm thinking about sculpting, but it's currently in placeholder. I want to share with you what I'm thinking and tell me what you think. So I'm trying to sculpt the wall edges like the reference with the arch, or should I approach it like the other brick reference? Another idea I just attached by Adil Sharif, a foliage artist, that I may end up doing. I'm not sure which one you're referring to. Is that the last image you shared? Before we started streaming? Maybe. But yeah, my idea was just looking at the rest of the scene, right? Where you have these brick walls that are sort of covered in plaster at the top. And if you're gonna have two of those elements already, right, we might as well just make use of them. And I was just thinking, like, if you want to do something like this, where the brick is exposed, you don't even have to go that dramatic with the damage, and then just have like a plaster layer on top. I think that could be really nice for like a foreground element. So yeah, honestly, that's what I would do, because then I'm looking at it from like a reusability perspective, right? Where we can reuse the materials that you already have, and then if we don't make the damage too drastic, what we could do is literally just go in here and say, let's imagine this has like a tileable on it with your bricks, right? We can then just like in the area that we want to have detail, we can cut around the tileable and then just be like, hey, look, I'm just gonna cut in like my tiles. Or like my little brick pieces. That's the way that I love to think, you know? Because then we don't have to do any sculpting. We get like the geometry that we want, right? Because we're offsetting like all the edges with actual geometry. And we're just repurposing stuff that we already have in the scene, which is something that I love to do. You know, being smart. That's what I would do. Not that your approach is a bad one, right? Like if you really want to sculpt and you really want to get more variation in your silhouette that you can get with a tileable, then you would probably have to sculpt or something like that. Yeah. That's why I was saying that depending on how dramatic the shift in silhouette would be, it kind of influences which workflow that you can or can't use. Because if you just have like some shallow like silhouette variation, you can literally just cut around your tileable and just like extrude it a little bit without a lot of deformation, right? It's only after a certain point that you get to, yeah, you get potentially like a lot of deformation, which is where you would sculpt instead of using your tileable. Yeah, that is what I would do. Ba-dum-bum-bum. I know you said I don't have to sculpt. I just feel like if I were to cover the edges with ivy, it might be too much. I'm open to suggestions. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to cover it in ivy, right? Like you can do some cool stuff with things that exist in the scene already. So yeah, good stuff. Thank you for sharing your work. I like the updates. Keep it up. Next in the list, I think we're onto your work now, Eden. Let's have a look. There's Eden. I've done some comments for you already, but let's have a look. Where's your little entry? I am blind. Fallout. Let's go. Fallout Vault 33. Let's go. I'm a big fan of Fallout. So this is cool to see. Your questions for Wednesday. Well, first of all, welcome to the community. Lovely to have you. And thank you for jumping straight on board with like the 2-question thing that we have. That's a rule. So I'm glad that got noticed in the notification. The first question is there anything you would add or take away from the scene in terms of assets, lighting, textures, etc.? Something to add an extra layer of detail to the scene. Yeah, I think you've already started doing it with your latest updates, right? But there's definitely a lot of texture work that can definitely be done to increase the detail, especially in your interior shot, right? Which is like the biggest concern. It feels like this is like a brand new from the factory line that we're looking at, right? So we need to clean that up. Right. So that could be like an immediate thing without having to do with like a big overhaul of the scene. I did want to bring up some bigger, more fundamental issues that could be good to take into like your next work, right? So the stuff that I'm gonna say next, I don't really think that you need to adjust that for this one, but keep that into account for the next one, especially proportions. I think proportions in this scene is a big one. And I did like a little bit of an experimentation here, right? So if we see that a character is like 1 meter 80, right? Which is like an average doorway or something like that, right? So let's assume that this is like character height. Then these guys are almost as tall as I am, which is already, I mean, they can be pretty tall, so I can kind of live with this. But I think the most egregious thing is if we then compare that to the size of your staircase, you can quickly see that these are like huge steps, right? And I think if I were to convey one thing is that proportions are a big topic, right? And it literally goes into like every texture that you make, every asset that you craft. It literally like spans the whole thing, right? Because sometimes what might happen is that you would make something that kind of looks that could potentially be confused with something else that throws off the scale completely. I'll give you an example of that specifically here. For example, these kind of like netting, right? I know that that is netting from the context of it's holding the wall back. But at first, what I thought was that it was like a chain link fence or something like that, right? And if you then compare that to like what you would expect, it feels like way out of scale, of course, right? Because these are like huge gaps. Like you can crawl through those things. So yeah, it's all about like the perception of the scene and how those individual assets like work together. Because right now, what a lot of the proportions are doing is everything feels the same. I'll give you another example, right? Like these are some really thick beams, and they don't really get like contrasted by something smaller, right? So if we look at references, for example, ooh, steel scaffolding. Let me see if I can find a quick one here. Something that shows the scale of it as well, right? And then if we look at something like this, or copy this over here. We can sort of quickly see that like our character over here makes these guys like really, really thick looking, right? If we go for like normal scaffolding. Now, there is a way to kind of balance those things, right? It's like, so for example, you could keep these guys as big boys, right? And then you could say like, okay, these are like the big support struts, right? So they're gonna have like bigger feet and they're gonna be supporting the whole structure. So they're the chunky boys. And then what you could do is add like smaller ones in between that kind of give weight to the structure again, right? Because now not everything has the same proportions, but we're starting to like balance things out, and like there's a nice hierarchy in terms of shapes going on. Right? So something like this becomes like way more interesting to look at than everything being the same size, right? And that can be applied to everything in the scene, really. That's why in this case, it could have actually been really interesting looking at like what has been done with vaults already, and to see where the support structures are, like how thick they are, what are they inspired by, what does a real Fallout shelter look like in real life, right? I'm getting a bunch of references to see how to do that stuff in real life. But that is honestly the biggest thing here is proportions. We said enough about it already. But yeah, that would be something to look into. I had a mannequin up in Blender while modeling, but things started to skew once I started importing. Yeah, so that was another thing that I was gonna say. I don't know if I added in here. Yeah, so add mannequins. Like you want to have mannequins all over the place, both in Blender, which is good. That's what you're doing, but also just have that in your scene everywhere because it's gonna help you constantly verify if the stuff that you're putting in relates well to a mesh, right? Arvid is saying the same thing, 100%. I do this too, right? Like whenever I'm building stuff, I mean, you saw me doing that like last week on stream even, where I didn't have a mannequin, but what I did is I pressed play and I have like a mannequin set up so that I can walk around in the scene so that everything feels good in relationship to the mannequin, right? That's also another way of doing it. Right. Other big takeaways, too clean. You mentioned this yourself as well. You're working on that too. But that can apply to the exterior, the interior, basically everything in the scene. It's also too sparse, right? What is interesting about environments is that there's a balance going on, right? So there's again this hierarchy happening where so a good way to establish a hierarchy in the scene, if we do like a really quick sketch here, is where you want the focus to be. You're going to add a bunch of stuff, right? So I don't know what this is going to be, but this is where you want to add a bunch of stuff. And then you have like a couple of other things like in the rest of the scene. I'm trying to keep this like really generic, right? These are just some random shapes, right? I'm trying to not draw anything too specific. But you can see by just adding more stuff, like we draw the player's focus, right? But what is happening in the scene is that there's nothing really to focus at because the lighting is consistent across the whole thing. The amount of assets or filler is kind of similar across the whole thing. So that's where if you want to add like a little bit of storytelling. So let's say this is your room, right? What does your room look like, and what does that need? Because then we can look at like, okay, there's like a desk here with some food on it. There's like a chair that's sticking out, and I don't know. There's like a carpet on the floor with like I don't know, like a wardrobe in the back. And I know I'm giving like very simple rudimentary examples, right? But we can already start seeing that we are pushing the attention more towards like one area now because we are putting more stuff in it. Recently added some decals in my thread on Discord actually. Yeah. I think so. I had a look at that already, and that's going in the right direction. But it's also in the terms of the hierarchy of what the scene needs. Decals are more like something that you do at the end, where like the proportions and like the set dressing that should happen before we add decals, right? Because I think you're doing a good job at. Okay, let's have a look, right? So we'll bring it up here. What is happening? Is my like headphones dying or something? Some music keeps cutting out. Boo. Okay, give me a sec. Okay, there we go. We're back. So, right. Okay, if we look at this really quickly, right, because you just added this. I'm gonna ask you one question. Why? I'll make it a bit more clear, right? Why is there paint here? Why is there paint here? Why is there paint here? Why are there like burn marks on the wall? Why is this stuff here? Why is there stuff damaged here, right? And I really want you to think about that question, because that's actually an important one to ask yourself, right? Because if there is no reason as to why, people will immediately be able to tell. And yeah, they will immediately be able to tell. And that's not great for like immersion, right? This is ice cream. I mean, I know we're saying a lot, right? So this is like I'm overloading you with information at this point, right? So that's why I said this is the process, right? You need to take that in and then see if you can implement that for the next environment. That's why I'm trying to kind of give like a broad overview so that it could be helpful for the future. But the question of why is actually a really, really powerful one. Like, because if we zoom in on this, right? Like, why is there paint here? Well, maybe because someone was painting like this stripe up here. And there's like a bucket, like a paint bucket next to it. And then they were trying to paint this wall here. There's some drips as well because they really sucked at like painting, right? But now the why is, oh, because they wanted to paint this here, right? But they kind of sucked at it. But if you just look at it in isolation, like it makes no sense for paint splotches to be there because they have no purpose of being there just by themselves without context, right? So the question of why is actually like a really important one to ask. If you place a decal down, why is that decal there? And why is it not like more to the left, right? And the same can be done to like any prop, anything that you put down, right? Cool. I know that this was a lot. I do think that, like, especially the later screenshots that you started posting, right? Like the more dramatic angles that you have, showcasing the texturing that you're doing, looks really cool. We're getting some variation in the surfacing. That's doing some really good stuff to the scene. So keep that up, but especially think about the question of why, and that's going to help you be, that's going to help you get like a better understanding of what you're doing within this environment, and also what you're trying to convey to the player or the viewer in this case. Oh, also references. Millions and millions of references. Fair Mora. Tim, is it okay to break realistic proportions? In my scene, the concept art makes a lot of props extremely huge. Massive roof tiles, big air conditioning unit, etc. Should I correct that in my scene? No. So this is the thing, right? Like if you are going to go for a stylized scene, that is a difference between like doing something realistic and stylized, right? Is that you are deliberately breaking like the rules of realism, but you have to break them consistently, right? So, for example, if your aircon is twice the size of a normal aircon, but then your bucket next to it is like the normal size, and then like your hammer is like 5 times the size, and then someone's chair is like half the size, that's where it breaks down, right? Because the proportions are not consistent with each other. So that's the biggest thing there, is that you can break it, but it kind of needs to adhere to a rule set that you have made for your own environments, right? In this case, the concept, right? This was super useful. Thank you so much. No, and thank you so much for posting your work, Eden. It's cool to see it. Again, big Fallout fan. I love what you're doing with it already, right? Like, I can recognize some of these areas from like Fallout playthroughs and stuff. So it's cool. It's cool to see what you're doing. And I would say best of luck with it. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing like some storytelling going on. Would be sick. Right. Who was next? We are gonna go with Senkai. Hello, Senkai. I have not made any notes for you just yet. Let's get on that. You made a jar of pickles as well. I'll share your jar of pickles. I don't know why I deleted it, but it was in here before. Here you go. Look at this beautiful jar of pickles. I know that sounded sarcastic, but it actually looks really good. Because something like this is not easy to set up, you know? Hello, Slade. Good to see you. You're doing well, buddy. Yeah, I got some nice pickles going on. Sweet. Okay, we're not gonna delete the pickles now. Just gonna keep the pickles company. Right, what are the questions that I can help with? So, let's see. I'd like to ask if you think the angle and field of view of all the shots looks good, as well as what you think might be a good addition or change to the scene. I want to make sure I got the block out right before I start working on unique assets. Let's have a look. So this is the one that's based on the concept, right? I do like what's going on here. I honestly don't even think that you need those two additional camera shots for now. And that is something that we'll explore later down the line, right? Because I think this shot is really strong. Shot number 1 is really good. But these two, I don't know, they need some work. I would maybe say like rotating the camera like a little bit more like this, so that the camera is almost like in this corner now. Right, so that you can almost do like the opposite, depending on if you've built a room, right? That you can do like the opposite and kind of have like the camera I don't know, like over here or something, right? Maybe, because I just don't think that there's like... Okay, let me break this down. Because I'm generally not a fan with like how static this shot feels, right? Because the camera is like on the same sort of lines. The thing is, I'm not really planning on showing off the other side. That is good, right? So then we can just get rid of the camera in that case. Or like rotate the camera so that maybe instead of rotating it to the right, we can rotate it to the left and then maybe make it a bit more interesting so that we don't have this box that we're looking into. Maybe we're looking at it from, what would that be? Something like this, right? So we're looking into the corner. Like this instead. If that makes any sense. Yeah. And because, I mean, this shot as well, like, not really needed at the moment, right? I know that I'm being, like, pretty harsh, but oftentimes what really saves a lot of scenes is just making this one the best that you can be, right? And then if you see an opportunity to make a second angle, sure. But if you don't see an angle in the beginning, you don't have to force the environment to, I don't know, to make an angle up for you, right? Like sometimes that just doesn't make sense. So I'm totally fine with just focusing on this one for now. And then later on, when we see the opportunity, we can still do like another one, right? Quentin craves pickles. I am honestly not a fan of pickles. I've never liked them. My dad loves them to bits. But yeah, that's probably why he likes them. You know, he knew that I hated them, so there's more for him. Makes it easier to make just one shot really good. Yeah, and it's also from like a mental capacity aspect that you're not thinking about like okay, I'm doing everything for this shot, but then I need to do all this stuff for this shot. It's like you just streamline the whole process a little bit, right? From like both a mental, physical capacity. Let's see. And what you think might be a good addition or change to the scene. And I honestly think that there's not too much for me to have a look at here. Because you're working from a concept. I think the concept works pretty well. So yeah, honestly not at this point. Because I can already tell, like, maybe the thing that I want to see more is a bit more breakup in the silhouette of objects, right? So what that means is, again, nothing is straight, right? So this edge on this table is not going to be straight. It's going to be like, I don't know, a little bit wonky, a little bit carved looking. Same for the beam as well, right? Like making sure that this beam kind of feels like it's not straight, right? But it kind of has like a little bit of like wonk and a little bit of crookedness. And this is super easy, right? This is just cutting in like a couple of loops and just like deforming the edges ever so slightly so that it becomes like more organic. But it really, really helps with the read of the scene. Because one of the things that this scene has is that the silhouette is a box, right? So we need to put in all the effort to break up that it feels like a box, right? So we do that by breaking up the pillars, maybe the walls, maybe the frames from the doors, like anything that we can do to break up that boxy shape. That could be good. But for now, I don't really want to add stuff to it. I want to see you just like continue the way that you're going about it, right? Just focus on the one angle. And keep on executing. Because a lot of stuff, like... I'm being so generic with my words today. A lot of our realizations that we have when we create environments happen along the way. Because I might have like a bunch of ideas now about what I want to do with this environment. But as we start crafting things, as we go along, there might be other cooler ideas that come up because we get inspired by the things that we're doing at that point, right? So iteration is a big part of scene building. And then the last thing was like nothing is straight, right? I'm gonna be more specific with it this time. Because you have a boxy room. Break that up as much as you can, right? Any opportunity that you can see to like add a slight bit of like offset or wonkiness or whatever you have to do to break up the feel of it being just like a boxy room. We need to get rid of that. So yeah, those would be like my two things. Gotcha. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, like in the process, like the progress, should I say? Yeah, maybe it's also worth adding like a little bit of geo to like the wooden floor as well, so that you have like the wooden floor like slightly coming up at the edges. And again, that's just cutting in geometry using the already existing like tileable, right? Because if I'm thinking about like old wooden cabins, like they're not like perfectly straight, right? So adding those deformations on like any surface that we can find, really, it's going to help a lot. And you could potentially do the same thing on the walls as well. So yeah, that kind of goes into like the boxy room, break it up at all costs bucket. But yeah, good stuff, Senkai. Good to see your work. Yeah, keep it up. Keep making awesome jars of pickle. Let's not look at the pickle for too long, because then Quentin is gonna get even more hungry than he is already. The walls and the floor will be unique and modular geometry. Okay. Pickles. Cool. Thank you, Senkai. Thank you for sharing your work. Thanks so much for the feedback, Tim. I'll have some new work ready for next week. Awesome. It's gonna be cool. Quentin ate an hour ago. No, there's always room for pickles, you know? Yeah. Exactly. Cool. Okay, I think we're free balling at this point, right? So Senkai was the last one, I think, from the queue. So yeah, let's have a look at some of the other people's work. Right. Okay, we're gonna start out with Alander. Really good to see your work. I know that we've talked a lot on and off, and I think this might be your first work in progress thread. Think, or I might be misremembering. I have no clue. As I said, Top G. Yes, we already talked about your work. Yeah. You took a nap. Oh my god. All stomachs have a separate chamber for pickles. Oh my god. I mean, that's a very German thing, right? If I remember correctly, I think you might be from Germany. It feels like that's like a Eastern Europe kind of thing, you know, like pickled stuff. Not that other countries don't like it, but it feels like very much at home in like that cuisine, you know? Swedish? Oh, well, I guess they do it the same thing, right? I'm French. Dang it. Here's me trying to isolate people. We pickle a lot? Yeah, that's what I mean, right? Because like, I mean, in like the Eastern European and especially I guess Scandinavian countries as well, right? Being Polish, yeah. Kowalinsky pickled watermelon? I think I heard of this. Pickle stuff in the cold country. Yeah. Pickled watermelon. Oh my god. I need to... So I'm not a fan of pickle stuff, but I'll happily try it. Well, no, that's not true. I like kimchi. I just don't like pickles. I'm okay with what's that called? Pickled onions? I don't think I've ever had a pickled onion. I feel like my pickle game is like on the floor, you know? You like sauerkraut? So I was thinking about that, and I can't even remember the last time that I had sauerkraut, because I think that's where my dislike of pickles began, with sauerkraut. Yeah, but see, oh no, actually, that's not true. That's not true. I remember where it comes from. So it comes from burgers. I hate pickles on burgers. I hate it. Because to me, I don't like that taste on a burger. And even if I can open a burger and I can throw them out, it's done. Like the burger's dead to me. Because the taste is still in there, you know, because it's such a strong, unique taste. Oh, that's where it began. Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much. But I know I'm going against everyone in the chat at this moment. They have a jar with pickled watermelon in Stalker 2. Do they really? don't think. Oh, well, I haven't been paying attention. Unsubscribed. Yeah, that's deserved. Yeah, this is my cancel moment, you know. My family were making some for ourselves when I was little. I'm not sure all my friends could eat one. Yeah. I think so. I think if we would have done that in our family, and that would have been like normalized, I think I would have loved pickled stuff. And even saying this, right? So with me going all out in my war against pickles, I still want to try pickling like a bunch of stuff myself. I love the idea of trying that stuff myself, you know? Pickles are my religion. I'm from Ukraine. I didn't know that. Well, no. Yeah, pickling in general is like a big thing. Yeah, I didn't know that pickles were so well beloved. But yeah, do I like sauerkraut? I don't think so. To be fair, I do need to give it another shot though. But yeah. General store one, I could eat the whole jar. Oh my god. The pickles. Okay. To wrap that up. Well, I guess I'm not gonna wrap it up, but I'll ask you the question. If let's say I'm gonna start pickling stuff myself, any recommendations? I'm open to any suggestions. I love kimchi, and I feel like it's pretty similar. Yeah, so yeah, I've gotten to love kimchi. So I can see myself now loving sauerkraut because I ate sauerkraut before I started to love kimchi. So yeah. Next team for the team challenge pickles. That would be funny. Like not the theme, right? But let's say, I don't know, let's say we do witches den again, and it's like a witch that's just like pickling stuff. Next team challenge farming themed would be cool. I mean, you could almost do that with like any challenge we've done before, right? Like echoes of the past. Like you could even make it around like a farmer, like a medieval farmer or something. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Eden, and thank you so much. I mean, welcome to the community. Lovely to have you, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work. No witches den is done. Jack of Diamonds is saying, try again and again, millions of recipes. Yeah, I need to give it a try. I do want to give it a try for sure. Echoes of the past and you do a pickling factory? Oh my god, that would be so funny. All right. Alander, let's see. So Alander did like a bunch of analysis on like this thing that they want to build, which is really cool. All the stuff makes a lot of sense to me. Window wall. Okay, so you want to make this modular. I mean, you could, right? But this is almost again one of those cases where there's no real reason to kind of make it modular necessarily, or I would make it modular in the sense what would even be a good way to do this modular? Like, where would we gain modularity in this scene? I would honestly forego modularity for this almost completely and just make a shell of a building with like a couple of cut-ins and then have like windows that have like almost similar meshes, but then vary them up slightly, you know, and maybe texture them slightly different. I don't think there's a lot of modularity in this one necessarily. If you want to do that, you can, right? There's nothing wrong with it necessarily. And I think the breakup that you've done is also pretty good. But then you'll have to account for like these sort of things, right? That has to be a variation of, let's say, this wall piece, but instead of that, like this wall piece basically needs to be the same one as that, but then the cutout is going to be different, right? That's like the biggest thing that's going to change there. Cool, but actually your questions. So, okay, so we have like 5 questions. We've answered a couple of them in the community already. So let's see. So the second question here is just, do I simulate this completely in Unreal Engine, or do I do it in Blender or something like that, right? What I would do, honestly, I love to keep this pretty simple. I would just maybe you could simulate the geometry. You kind of have it like nicely flowing and like in between those two pillars, right? In Blender. And then export that as like a piece of like an asset. And then I would just animate that with a simple grass wind or something like that. You know, it doesn't need a lot. I would just isolate the center and the edges, and the stuff around the poles is going to remain static. Make a quick mask for it, and then just animate it with like a world position offset shader that uses simple grass wind or something like that. It's going to be subtle enough that you can't even see that it's going to be doing anything weird. 3D tiles, the best approach. I think you brought up like an array, right? Like just modeling a few of them and then arraying them. I think that's the best way. If you are a little bit more technically inclined, you can make your own geometry script that just like scatters them randomly, right? Because an array has its limitations, right? You can't really inject like a lot of randomization into it. Whereas with a geometry script, you can. And to be fair, like if you just wanna make a thing that scatters these tiles based on like a plane, that is not too difficult to do. So yeah, that could be a good thing. Yeah, if you're gonna go with an array, right? You go with that. Then always use that as a base. And then once you got the array done, then I would pick and choose and cut out like individual tiles and make it feel really unique, right? Because that's where the interest is going to go in. So yeah, always use that as a base and then edit manually afterwards to make it more unique. Or geometry nodes or mesh or whatever the equivalent is in Max, right? I'm assuming that you can like randomly scatter or use an array and then an FFD modifier and like do an edit poly on top of it so that you can cut out like individual tiles, right? You can do some cool stuff. Right, and then what do I do with the unseen part of the house, right? It's a good question. Honestly, I'm gonna make this really simple. Step 1, do we care? Are we gonna rotate around the whole thing? Is that even relevant to this project? If yes, then step 2, honestly, this building just looks like a box, so we can just use the same modular pieces and just make the same thing around, you know? I think this is one of like the most straightforward examples that I've seen when it comes to a building, right? I can almost imagine that the right side is going to look the same as the left side. And maybe what you need to do is find a way to do a little bit of extra set dressing, or I don't know, maybe make like a garden at the back, you know, or maybe use more of the ivy that you have in the front. But it's honestly, you use the same elements that you already have to make the rest of it, right? Because yeah, it's not worth making like a whole new thing just because like we already have like a bunch of stuff here, right? So once we have like this side of the building, the back side of the building is super simple. We can just reuse the same modular piece and stuff. Is modularity more for multiple buildings? Yes, that is the core design of modularity, right? Like modularity as a concept all has to do with making more stuff reuse the same resources, right? So using a tileable texture in like 100 different locations, that is like modularity when it comes to textures. But usually when we talk about like modularity, we talk about a modular kit, right? And a modular kit, you only make if you want to reuse it in a bunch of places, because then we don't create like new assets, right? So the more that we use the same sort of pieces, the easier it becomes for our resources to be shared, right? Because if, let's say I'm in a big city and there's like a bunch of like wooden scaffolding like around, right? If that is one kit, I only need to load in the textures and like the assets, and the rest of it can all be instanced, right? So the more that we have already in memory, the easier or like the cheaper it is to kind of build with it in the future, right? And the more that you can do that, obviously the more efficiency we can squeeze out as we can. So that's where the real strength comes in, right? Because let's say if you have a city and I don't know, for a godforsaken reason, you make like all the scaffolding unique, that is all gonna have to load in at the same time with its unique textures, its unique geometry, all that kind of stuff. And it's gonna be a burden on your resources, right? Because at a certain point, your whole bandwidth, like your texture bandwidth and your GPU bandwidth, is going to just be filled with just like trying to stream in like all the freaking scaffolding, right? So yes, modularity is purely there to make more with less resources or with shared resources. Cool. Thank you, Alander. Best of luck to your work. Next up, we've got Ramat. Let's have a look. Ramat is struggling a little bit with proportions as I read it. So the first thing is getting the right size of some of the buildings, such as the windmill and the houses. And sometimes I think parts are too small and too big. Okay, I did a little exercise here. It's been a while since I've actually drawn all of it out. But this is a good exercise to how do you actually measure like the proportions of something, right? We kind of done the same thing when it came to Eden's work a little bit ago. But we can use the same sort of thinking, like relating everything back to a mannequin as best as we can, right? So usually what I'll do is I look at a concept art and I'm like, okay, where can we get as close to human proportions as we can, right? Obviously, we need to take in like a big grain of salt because a concept art is going to be, it's going to be a bit, it's not going to be proportionally accurate, right? It's not going to be, yeah, we can't really trust it 100%, but we're going to try our best. So one of the spaces that I saw here was like this little door in the middle, which I'm going to assume is going to be roughly player height, right? And I use that to measure the size of the tower, right? So that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking this door and I am saying like, okay, from bottom to top, how tall is this tower, right? And then we come out to a number of like 12 times human size, plus minus, right? Keeping into account like a little bit of variation there. And then we go here. And then I do the same thing here because you already have a door that is roughly like human size, right? Again, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. We can tell that we're already like a little bit short, right? Because we are missing roughly one human in our equation, right? So we need to make the tower taller. Then we can use the same sort of calculations, like rough calculations for the width as well. So if we then take our rough proportions here, and then I kind of take like, I don't know, I took the middle of the tower, which is probably not the greatest. We can see that it's five times the width. And then if we compare that here, we can kind of see that this is supposed to be like more the width of the tower. And it probably also has like a stronger taper, right? But we can already see that if we then compare the proportion to the proportion that you have now, is that it is going to be taller and it's going to be slimmer as well, which adds a lot to the proportions of this thing. And we can do that for the whole scene, right? Like always try to put mannequins and try to relate everything to like human scale because that makes it so much easier. Right, and then we do that, like try, compare, and repeat because like even in this case, I could be like, that feels like really tall, right? So you would build it and you would then compare it just like to the concept and see if it sort of resembles something similar in proportions. And then we can kind of tweak by eye, right? It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to look like the thing, right? Second question here is the layout. Sometimes when I try to make a layout of a building, when I get off from cinematic view, some of the buildings feel very far off, but after I adjust it, it looks weird in cinematic viewport. That is because in cinematic viewports, or just like any camera viewport really, you have a lot of camera settings and focal distances and field of view and all that kind of stuff can really distort the way that you see things, right? So that is something to take into account. What I'll say is that for the majority, that doesn't matter. I would honestly not even bother with like a cinematic viewport at this point. Or if you do, just like keep it consistent, right? And then build towards that camera, right? That's what I would do. Like keep your camera consistent, because like we're gonna run into issues if you are rebuilding your scene and then like doing changes to the camera and then rebuilding your scene and changes to the camera. It's like we need to keep one thing consistent so that we can balance the other thing against it, because otherwise we're just gonna loop around in circles all the time. In this case, what I would do is I would just grab a default camera. I would put it at like a rough distance, and then what I would do personally is I would keep the camera like on the bottom right. I would pin it, and then I would build my entire scene until it looks somewhat relatable to the concept art. That's what I would do. Because again, it doesn't need to be perfect. I would say go by eye and feeling like a little bit more. Cool. Thank you, Ramat. Thank you for sharing your work, and best of luck. Let's see. Do we have... Oh, I think this might have been the last one with some comments. Okay, let's have a look. Osora. Who's this? Matthew. Tim. Yeah, I think this is looking really, really good. I'm not sure what your questions were, but you definitely feel like the lighting is very flat. Because, yeah, that is the thing that you want to focus on. I don't know what you want me to really focus on, so I'm just gonna say like the flat lighting. It is a really good base though, because if you look from a distance, these screenshots, they feel more like pictures to me. So I feel like you've already done like a really good job at it. Like really nailing like the real world conditions of what they feel like, right? Now there is something like, okay, how can we make this more interesting, right? Because nailing the look and making it feel like it's real life might sometimes be like pretty boring. What I would try out is, if you want to have like more depth in your scene, is try playing around with like the atmospheric depth first, right? And then maybe even go in with like some volumetric fog. Like it doesn't need to be like super intense, but yeah, you can add volumes to kind of give you the impression that there's more depth into the scene, right? I mean, you did something like that here. It's a little bit much, right? But I feel like if you turn that back and you make it a bit more subtle, you add like a lot of depth to the scene, and I think that could be like really, really cool. And then also my second thing was like, yeah, the textures are gonna add a lot too, you know, because a lot of it is still block out, or like placeholder, should I say? So yeah, that is gonna make a huge difference as well in the read. And then also, if you're going for like realism, right, or like hyper realism, or whatever you want to say, think about like imperfection, right? The pole here being a slightly off kilter is awesome. Do the same thing for those poles in the background as well, right? And like it's gonna really depend on like the small things, right? Like how you break up I don't know, the edges of the building, how the transition is gonna work from like snow to leaves, right? Because if you think about it, the leaves probably fell first and then the snow came on top of it, right? So how does that look? Are the leaves going to be affected by snow? Probably, right? So blending those two things together a bit more. But yeah, that's definitely going to add a lot. Right, want to say, holy moly, I thought it was a picture. Yeah, me too. I think really realistic values, right? And obviously the Megascan foliage helps with that as well. At least I think it's Megascans, right? Some of it is... oh no, so mega scans for some of the snow mounds, and then plant factory to make the trees in the background. Okay, cool. Cool. I've not used plant factory before, so maybe that's also one thing that we could try out on stream. Natsuro in plant factory. But yeah. Cool stuff, Matthew. Like for next one, if you want to throw me some questions, right? Like what specifically I can help with, feel free to let me know, and then we can be a bit more specific with it. Cool. Next one is Jake. Jake is working on the final university project. So, a couple of questions. How does the scene feel now with the newly added fog and sky improvements? Does it closely match the references I picked? Yeah, I do think so. I think the fog helps a lot, right? If you compare it to like the screenshot on the right, I think it does a really good job. What I personally like to use now, and this, I don't know, this is my personal preference. I would potentially extend or like increase the distance where the fog starts. But to compensate, I would add like local fog with like fog volumes or stuff like that in the foreground. The benefit about that is that we can be more specific, we can be more directed with where we want the fog to be, right? Adding volumetric fog volumes. That is something that we heavily experimented with the latest team challenge, and had like really good effect across all the teams, I would say. That's what I would do, and then you can really tweak where you want your fog to be, right? Because I don't know if the plan is still... Oh, the lining up the door feels really weird now with this thing. But if the plan is still that like, hey, we want to focus here, then we would need to clear up the fog so that it doesn't impede on you looking there, right? If we still want to push people towards that door. Cool. As I started working on the wooden slat stylable, any feedback would be great. Is it too noisy? I'm in the process of adding smaller knots and break up the shape. Then vertex painting between the painted and unpainted version as well. So I had a look at this before the stream. I think the distance read is actually pretty good, but I would say that in terms of the sculpt, the consistency of the wood grain is the thing that probably would be like the biggest feedback from my side. Because what you kind of want to see is, let's say you have like your wooden grain, you kind of want to see like a big gash go into like a small gash going into like a big one, right? Because that makes it like more interesting to look at. Like the variation of like the wood grain. And that's also something that you can see here, right? You have like these bigger chips that go out of it, and then you have like more subtle patterns. Like these bigger guys compared to like just some small surface noise. The variation and the contrast between the two makes it really interesting to look at as a texture, right? And that also ensures that at a distance we kind of lose like the interesting read, right? Because the slats themselves, they are pretty straight. So what would be interesting is that the slats have more variation. Maybe not as much as my freaking hand is doing now. But that ensures that from a distance, there's still variation happening, right? Right, because everything kind of comes down to the same sort of principle, right? It's like, how does it read from like a big distance? How does it read from like a medium distance? And how does it read from like a close-up distance, right? The stuff that you're doing here is interesting when you get up really close, but as soon as you get like at a certain distance, it just becomes like, I mean, it's gonna sound like really, really in your face or like really rude, but like it just comes down to like it looks like an extruded cube with some noise on it, right? We want to make sure that the edges are varied as well. So always keep like big, medium, small in mind. But yeah. Yeah. The knots look really good. Some of the lines look really good as well. I think honestly, what I would do is keep sort of the surface variation that you have right now. Reduce it by like 60 to 70%. And then like cut in like some other big pieces here and there, and then the rest of it is going to be like more fine detail on top of it, and then it becomes like better to read from a distance. Hopefully, you're saying worth mentioning just in case that the reference texture, if I'm not mistaken, is fully sculpted in a ZBrush and brought to designer. Yeah. I assume so because this is God of War stuff, right, from John Orolano. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, otherwise, good stuff. I'll be working mostly on my titleables as that's the aspect that I have the least experience in. That's good. I think this is a perfect project to just like really train that stuff up, right? And really try to take that to the next level. So good stuff, Jake. Best of luck. And keep us updated. Right. David. Hello, David. Good to see you. I don't think I've seen your work before. So good to see you as well. Thank you for posting. So let's see. I've started working on this control inspired project and I'm looking for any type of feedback. Currently, I'm a bit concerned about the feel of the space, the scale, and the composition. Cool. Okay. So let's I'm gonna have to ask you some questions on this, right? So and this is gonna be more for yourself, but with feel of the space, what does that mean? Right? Because I can definitely help with the composition and the scale, right? But like the feel of the space, we kind of need to dig into that a little bit before we can get to like a proper conclusion. So that would be like a question for you. What does that mean specifically, right? Because that can almost be like, ooh, I don't like the shape. It's all too cubey, right? It's like an example. I mean, it's going to be control inspired, so I doubt that's going to be it. But yeah. But maybe it's also like, I feel like everything is a bit too simple or too cubey, right? Or maybe it's not interesting enough. Yeah, because Quentin is saying like it feels like Control style for sure. Yeah, but like even if you look at Control, right, they have certain elements in certain rooms that kind of make things more interesting if they need be, right? So for example, there are areas where, let's say, I don't know, the back wall where they have like these like smaller elements, right? Like all these like individual cubes that are kind of like making up the wall. You'll see that in certain rooms in Control as well. And if you use those sort of elements in certain spaces, that can make the room like a bit more interesting as well. Not saying that you have to do that in your case, but that is just to to break up what otherwise would be like relatively monotonous, right? And that is like one example. You can also be like, hey, I am gonna stop this like noisy pattern here. And then this is gonna be, it's been a while since I played like Control. But that is like, okay, this is like zone A22, right? So that's like a little bit of signaling. Probably feels like a little bit too modern for what you want to expect for like Control stuff. But that could be also a way to like indicate some sort of hierarchy or some sort of like detail into the whole place, right? Or you could break up like some of the pattern here and make it like a different pattern. There's so many ways of like adding a little bit of more interest to the room if that is what you feel, right? But that comes down to what do you feel, right? Like what does that mean necessarily? Now you do talk about like the scale. I don't really see anything wrong with the scale necessarily, to be honest. I feel like the scale is really clearly defined. I do also like that you have this element of like big brutalistic shapes that then get contrasted with like these staircases, giving like the whole space a nice readability from like a human perspective, right? Like I can see that the proportions are in a good state. So it feels natural proportion wise to me. Let's note that down. So they feel good. Nothing really to complain there. But yeah, I can definitely see like an interest in like how do you add like a bit more interest. That's pretty vague, right? Like what do we mean with interest? I'm gravitating towards there's a lot of interesting things extra to do with Wednesday feedback, but it's already 1:50 for me, so I'm out. Thanks for the stream. Thank you for being here, Rustam. I appreciate you being here. Let's see. Yeah, I hope you have a good night. So, how do you add a bit more structure? I guess that's probably the best way that I can say it. Because what I'm thinking about with Control is that you have like signage, waypointing, and that kind of adds like this very human element, right? It's this really foreign place and this really like weird, yeah, it's this really weird foreign space, but it is still inhabited by humans and it feels like very corporate at the same time. So there's like this weird, uncanny combination, right? So how do you add like a bit more human into the mix? And that can literally be just like, okay, this is an office, so this is going to be someone's nameplate. I mean, this is not going to be an office, but like, I think on the other side, there were some offices. Did I see them? Yeah, there were some offices here. It's like little things, like little nameplates and little tags, like around. And then maybe like the occasional plant here and there, you know? It's like this facade of like, oh, it's still like a corporate thing. And there's like occasional plants and stuff. Yeah, something like that, maybe. And the composition, I think the composition is decent. I do like this one. This is a bit more out there. I'm gonna give you try with the rule of thirds. Give that a try. So take your frame, split it into 3 equal parts, And in your case, I would put this box like somewhere here, and then see if you can find like an interesting like camera angle or rotation or something like that, so that you can have that in like the power position for it. This one is already doing that to a certain degree, right? But then I kind of feel pretty awkward with this intersection of like the staircase. So you might have to see how far you can push things. Right. That will be it. Thank you for posting your work. Looking really, really cool. It's going to be a fun one to see get textured. Yeah, best of luck with that. Then we go to Juancho. Juancho is making some amazing progress on their environment. Love to see it. First question is, was something about the tree, I think, right? Yeah, do you think the tree in the background is a bit noisy? Excuse me. Number one is the tree noisy? Not at all, actually. I don't mind it at all. I think it works really well. So I think that's all good. You're all good on that front. And then your second question was, you made some cutouts into the floor, right? So we have like one cutout here, and then another one here. I'm seeing some weirdness coming up. Okay. I don't mind them necessarily. I think it's gonna be, yeah, it's not gonna be a showstopper, right? If you're gonna do those details, like I would put them in places where you can actually see them, right? So for example, here, potentially, right? That you have a cutoff. Just picking like a couple of spots where you can kind of see it. Or maybe move this like shoe a little bit so that you can see it a bit more. Because now it kind of blends in, right? But what I also noticed is that you added individual planks coming up from your tileable, which is cool. However, it is clipping through your carpet, right? So I would be careful with that. Also be careful with like how you repeat it, right? Because what might, yeah, I'm just thinking like it might be worth doing some additional texturing so that you get more depth in the tileable itself, and then add those individual bits on top of it in certain elements, right? Like really like make a plank that is sort of like matching with your tileable. Long live to the BE community. Thank you, Guillaume. It's good to see you back, buddy. Hope you're doing well, and we'll see you in the next one. Cool. So yeah, I would say get those as separate meshes so that you can be very specific where you place them. And then, yeah, do a bit more, I don't know, break up some of the edges or something like that. Let me write some stuff down. So the main tileable. Because the edges look a little bit too straight. I think there's not enough depth in it just yet. Because it... No. or like individual planks that you can add in very specific places. Cool. Yeah, great stuff. I know we're being like pretty annoying and picky, but yeah, be careful with like all that clipping. Fairmora is saying the staircase in the previous work is blocking the focal point. Also, it's guiding your eye away from the subject. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. Thank you, Juancho. Thank you. And last one for today, Roku. Let's have a look. The Japanese 90s arcade. Currently in the last stage of this project, texturing the final prop, the vending machine, and adding more storytelling. It will and has to be done by this Sunday. Please give me any feedback, since I'm at the stage where any kind of different point of view for people can improve this piece. Okay. Cool. Right. Individual tiles are pretty cool. They might be popping out like a bit too much, right? Because they kind of pop out like really far. Yeah, let me make some notes. Yeah, if anyone else from the chat has any opinions on this, let me zoom in on an image. If anyone wants to call out something that they can see, that would be cool. I like the individual cables here as well. They look pretty sick. Oh, I need to make sure. There's like slight faceting here. Maybe some litter like plastic cups. Yeah, that's a good point. Like making some like generic cups and like cigarette packets or whatever that you can think of, right? So that you can kind of scatter them in places. Because you could have like a cup on the floor, maybe with some stuff next to it. Then you could have like a cup up here. Those machines are so new and clean. Yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting one, right? It's almost a dichotomy towards like the rest of the scene because everything else is so dirty and so unclean, especially the floor, right? So maybe that could be something to fix, or even like use decals or something like that. So yeah, that's a good point, Rita. The machines are new in a dirty environment. There's some faceting. Adding clutter like cups, cigarettes, etc. The reason why I pick like some generic stuff here because it's so reusable, right? Like once you got it once, you can like crumple it up, and I don't know, you can do so much with it. Hello, Justine. I'd say the stools could use more geo on the cushions. Let's have a look. We have a zoomed in shot actually. We do not. Yeah. Faceting. More geo. Thank you. Think I say same for the ceiling. It's a bit too clean and missing some breakup. Yeah, I was thinking that some of the panels, like having basically the same thing that you're doing on the floor, right? Where you take like individual panels. Do the same thing on the roof, right? Where you can have like one panel missing. Well, maybe not missing. Oh, I guess that's what's happening here, right? Oh, I see. You're doing it in the back. Okay. So, pick like one up front as well. Like if you're doing it in like a couple of other shots. Let's see. That could be cool. Also 2 chairs instead of 1 in some areas, because it's a fighter machine. Ooh, okay. That's actually a good point. Yeah. You want to have some dual setups going, right? Oh, maybe not that one, because that one is broken. Pick the one broken machine. Okay, maybe not the best one. Oh. Amazing. You're still going to do the vending machine, right? Like, use the vending machine props as clutter. Justine is saying a decal of a water stain. Somehow those kind of ceilings always have water stains from leaks. Yes. Yes. Quinton is saying technically it should be everywhere if they're all versus co-op type games. Yeah, but what could be interesting is that you have a couple of like dual machines and then people stole the chair from like another machine, right? Because there's not enough chairs to go around. So having that variation, because what if every machine has 1, and then if we're gonna switch every machine to 2, it's gonna be 2 uniform again, right? We kind of want to have like a little bit of breakup. Yes, water leak. Water leak on the floor. That's a good suggestion. I like that. Maybe somewhere piling some for grabbing. Yeah, that could also be a good idea. There's like is there like a little corner that I saw? Oh, I guess that's what's happening here. Okay. These ones are a little bit weird in this corner though. I am honestly not a fan of this screenshot. So I will add a note that this is like the weakest screenshot. Or the weakest angle from all of them. I'll probably cut them out. But what could be cool is stacking more of these up, right? So like really stacking them up in a corner somewhere. Doesn't have to be this corner if this angle is going to be cut, right? But yeah, that could be cool. Is there a concept ref for this? I don't think so. No, none that was added anyway. Maybe roughness variation for the screens, but I think that's minor for now, perhaps. Maybe moving to the chairs. So there's a zigzag pattern a bit. Maybe moving the chairs. Yeah. It's like, yeah, pushing one here, pushing the other one closer. Also, this could be like an easy one, is have like different color chairs. Or like, It could be like an old chair. It could be like a newer chair, you know? Like you can do this with like a color multiplier or something like that, right? It'd be like really easy to set something like that up. Oh, let's have a look. Decal of water stain. I think that's a great idea. You can use that on the floor as well. Like have some like decals of water stains, you know? Like someone spilled something from a cup that's like fallen over. That is cool. Oh yeah, roughness variation for the screens. Yeah. What could also be cool is to have one of the screens like come to life, right? Like just showing some gameplay. Yeah, Sinkai, like would be cool for some of them to be on and showing like a start menu or something like that. Yeah. Dang, Rita. Like an art detective. The concept name is High Score on ArtStation. Have a look. They mentioned that? Let me have a look. Of course, I mispronounced it. Ooh. Someone already made it in 3D. That's cool. I do really like that. I have it in saved. Oh, okay. Okay, let's have a look then. Switch on over. Yeah. It's all in here, right? Like, there's so much good stuff in here. Like, the blinds, you kind of replicated the blinds. Like, yeah, just having some of the screens on, so cool. There's also like this rendering as well. It's pretty cool. But yeah, just having like some of the screens on and then having like a light emit from them could be like really, really interesting. But yeah. Honestly, we're just gonna grab this. We're gonna go back. And we're just gonna add this on here, right? Because honestly, yeah, that's a good shout. Getting inspired by concept art, especially when it exists. Great shout. Thank you, Rita. Cool. I think that's enough, Roku. Because I mean, you have until Sunday, so have fun with all of this. We just added like a bunch of last minute changes in for like the the last couple of days. Maybe testing more fisheye camera for this. Potentially, yeah. I think that could be optional. It could be cool to test it out, you know. It'd be cool. I'd also dial down the saturation of the posters and the graffiti so they are more faded out. I didn't even notice that. That in there. Yeah. Yes. Cool. Thank you all for the help. Like a security camera. Yeah, so okay, and this is actually the last thing that I'll bring up. That's why I'm not a fan of this angle. Like I generally am not a fan of like the security camera angle, right? It feels too gimmicky. Like it kind of feels, I don't know, it feels that I'm not like immersed in the environment, right? Where I mean, you'll even see it in here, right? Like even if it is like a fisheye camera, it is still at eye height because that makes it way easier for us to be immersed in it, right? So yeah, I usually prefer something like this compared to, or like a camera at eye level compared to like a security camera thing. Yeah, it's interesting, right? You can almost immediately tell which is from a concept because the scene is really built for that one, right? Like the other ones, the other angles, I should say, they have a lot of work that needs to be done because I mean some improvements that need to be done because like this is like pretty empty, right? And then this feels like really unfinished still. So it might be a case where be really, really, really picky with the camera angles that you put on your art station. I think the main one looks fantastic, but as soon as you put anything else on your portfolio that doesn't meaningfully add or is at the same level, you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? So I would have a look at some of the other camera angles and then be like, okay, which is the one that I like? And then spend a bit more time trying to refine it, you know, with like extra decals, extra details, all that kind of stuff to make it, to basically get it to like the next level. More I saying the light, the sunlight is way too bright in my opinion. Yeah, it's a weird one. Like I see what you mean. I personally don't mind it as much. Yeah. I do see what you mean though. I'm gonna play around a bit. This is the last thing that we'll do for today. I'm curious if we can. Okay, we are just gonna play around a little bit, have some fun. Get a little bit of contrast in there. Maybe make it like a little bit darker because I do like what they're doing in the concept that they're playing on like the evening mood, right? So what do we do now? Okay, let me hide all my scribbles, you know? This was before, and this is after. Making it like a bit more punchy, you know? In the concept art, the colors feel more saturated plus lower value. Yeah. I love the warm tint. Yeah, and I love the way that it cascades from the tiles below it as well. It looks really nice. And it also plays really nice with like all the cold colors that are like in the foreground as well, right? Like the blues and the greens and all that kind of stuff. There's a nice bit of contrast going on. So yeah, let me do. Okay, let me move some stuff around here. I'm gonna squeeze these three in there. Oh no. Oh no, that's gonna move on my drawings. Dang it. I didn't take that into account. Ugh. What do we do here? Okay. We're gonna push everything down. And then we're gonna drag this thing up. There we go. There we go. Good old post-processing can do the trick. Right. Cool. That's it. I think that could be... I mean, that's an easy thing to do, right? Making it more punchy, making it stand out a bit more. That's an easy one. And that's going to lift up the whole scene, right? And it's just honestly looking at what they did in the concept, right? Because the concept is such a good... yeah, such a good indication of what you can do. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Rok. Thank you for sharing. Lovely little scene. I love all the attention that you put into like the details and like all the little bits of the wall. Really cool. Really good choice of concept as well. But yeah. That's that for this week. It's a little bit longer than it was supposed to be, but I appreciate you all for being here. Yeah, last things that I want to say, I'll be back in 2 days. I'm actually not sure what we're gonna do. Like, it would be fun to maybe dive into some Arc Raiders or something like that, and dive into more the technical mumbo jumbo. We'll see. But I'm also feeling like a bit like Unreal Engine. So we'll see. It will either be a little bit of Arc Raiders. Well, first of all, there's a guaranteed portfolio review, so we're gonna review 2 portfolios, and then after which we will see. You know, maybe it's a little bit of Arc Raiders, maybe we'll do something else. We will find out. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I appreciate you all stopping by and giving Arc Raiders ranked tomorrow. There's no way. There's no way. I'm not that sweaty anymore. But yeah, we will see what we do. I will give you this last bit of random knowledge about myself. I used to be a competitive Crisis 2 player. What relevance that has to anything, it doesn't matter. But I was pretty high up in like the worldwide leaderboard for Crisis 2 multiplayer. Let me tell you that, if that's anything to go by. This was fun. Thank you for the stream. And thank you for contributing to it as well, Rita. Like, you got some really great suggestions, so thank you so much for adding those. Arc Raiders is in Unreal Engine, so that's true. That's true. This is a no-pickle household. Exactly. Exactly. I can't believe that's the highlight of the stream. All right. On that note, on that very sour and pickled note, yeah, happy to have you all here. Have a good evening, and we'll see each other on Friday.